In a hidden corner at the very end of Capitol Street stands a small, quiet, but very beloved cafe. It is from here that a warm, fantastic story in another world begins, where miracles and sincere feelings intertwine with a gentle aroma that lingers through narrow alleys. A cheerful young woman in a bright apron, carrying a plate of fragrant grilled meat, warmly welcomes guests to Hideout Cafe. In the ward, which smelled heavily of medicine, grandmother sobbed and regretted not noticing Mai's illness earlier, and Mai, even on oxygen, quietly tried to assure that it was not her fault, because the doctor said that this disease is hard to notice until it becomes serious. She accepted the truth, no matter how perfect medicine became in this world. Death was inevitable. Grandmother looked me straight in the eyes and mysteriously asked if she would be afraid to go alone into a strange world. I froze, looking at her with surprise and embarrassment at this strange question. Grandmother said it was not about the afterlife, but about a place much less cozy than the one that exists now. Instead, Mai would get a chance to live again in a healthy body. Hearing this, she cried, smiled, and whispered that it would be wonderful. Sobbing, she apologized for not having time to thank grandmother for her care and that she never expected her life to end at 25. Grandmother gently performed a magical ritual over her forehead, promised to give the best farewell gift, and asked her to do everything in her power when she found herself in the new world. My soul quietly flew away, and she sadly thought that she only accepted care and did not have time to repay it. Grandmother smiled through tears and said to live happily, and Mai barely asked to tell the cat Yatero that she would not return so he would not wait in pain. Then she fainted on a strange field at the foot of majestic mountains as two villagers approached from afar. And as consciousness faded, she called grandmother's name to herself. 2 months later in the village of Obai, Mai became healthy and capable, helped Lady Ingo chop wood and go hunting to prepare food from meat and bread, and the villagers adored her and marveled at how quickly she adapted, secretly admiring that the girl who once could not even fetch water or light a fire now hunted so skillfully. Waking up after 2 months in this world, she found herself in a strange room. People spoke a language she had never heard before, but strangely she understood it naturally. And what shocked her most was that the body that was once dying from illness was now completely healthy and full of life force. She quietly thanked grandmother's gift for giving her a chance to live on. She diligently learned from that kind old couple how to live in a world without electricity and water, where everything depends only on human labor. Meanwhile, looking at the bird on the branch, she herself wondered if there was something she could help with. She realized that her grandmother's true gift was the vast knowledge of magic and mana in her head. Mai checked this and froze in amazement when, casting a spell, she was able to knock down the bird with just her index finger. She vowed to train hard every day to improve her skills because that night the family would have a real dinner. Although she did not understand why her grandmother had such amazing powers, reincarnation and body restoration, Mai firmly decided to live to the fullest when twilight fell and darkness enveloped the moonless sky. She rushed home and was surprised to see the elderly couple standing next to a stranger named Jens, their son. The elderly couple with heavy hearts informed her that they would have to move in with Jens and his wife because the daughter-in-law was very weak after childbirth, and because of this Mai could no longer stay there. She understood that she had to leave, but instead of sadness, she smiled and said that she had already planned to go to the capital so that the couple would not worry or feel guilty. Mai sincerely thanked the two benefactors who saved her life while the old couple was still tormented by remorse. She began learning simple magic, from creating a small flame like a candle to shaping a spoonful of water and digging a small hole with earth magic. She realized that earth magic was the most precious gift her grandmother had left her. Mai became passionate about transmutation magic, a special spell that changes the structure of matter from one form to another, and recalled her father teacher's physics lessons. Realizing that diamonds and coal or opal and sand have the same components, she came up with using wood to make simple spoons and plates. Mai, combining earth magic and transmutation, extracted silicon dioxide and water from the soil and on the first try created shining opals. She shone with joy and pride for the incredible ability she had just demonstrated. The next morning before leaving, Mai smiled with a light sadness as she recalled those 2 happy months under the care and love of Mr. and Mrs. Ara, although she had nothing, and decided to use the opals she had made herself to gather money for the trip to the capital. She convinced herself with a strong 25-year-old body and the ability to wield magic, everything would definitely work out. I cheerfully waved goodbye to the elderly couple and wished them good health after 2 months of care. Before leaving, the old woman handed her a small pouch and asked her to open it only after she had gone, also reminding her to stay optimistic, beware of strangers, and find a place to spend the night before darkness fell to be safe. After 6 days, Mai finally arrived at the magnificent capital of the kingdom of well-known, her heart beating with excitement, and she decided to find an inn as a base to visit nearby establishments and learn about local tastes and cuisine. Although the first meeting she tried was a bit difficult, she was still delighted. Mai sat thoughtfully in the dining hall, thinking that magic could allow her to live comfortably without working, but quickly dismissed this idea. People need communication and meaning, not just food and sleep. She remembered her late grandmother Ryo and the cat Yetaro in Tokyo, how they ran a small cafe together, and her grandmother was the strongest woman she knew. But she realized she had heard almost nothing about her grandmother's childhood, except that she met her grandfather at 28, and she wanted to find out who this woman really was and what connections she had with this world. She believed that one day the secrets of her 78-year-old grandmother would be revealed while she wandered the noisy capital. Despite warnings that the house at the end of the alley was rarely seen by people because of the fields behind it, I decisively chose this place and confidently took the key from the broker. Setting out on a new journey, she decided to hide all her worries and loneliness deep inside herself. In a cozy corner of the capital, a solemn sign opening was hung to celebrate the birth of a small coffee shop. And immediately the enticing smell of steamed rice and generously stewed pork spread through the alley, causing passers-by to stop and praise the taste of the dishes and affordable prices. The bell on the door rang clearly, and Mai beamed with a joyful smile, greeting a familiar customer and calling him Henry. A young man with a calm appearance had just stepped into the cozy cafe. Henry was a civil servant with a respectable appearance and a serious look. Neatly dressed in noble clothes, he ordered lunch for the day and perhaps cheerfully accepted the order and immediately got to work near the smoking stove. Today's dish is tender stewed pork brisket with a boiled egg. Henry slowly began to savor it, and I quietly watched. Having finished, he put down the bowl and smiled contentedly, a vivid proof of how skillfully the young owner cooks, and I was pleased to see her client happy. It came to mind that Henry was a regular, coming almost every day for the last 2 months since the opening. She gently invited him for tea after lunch. Henry wanted to pay extra to support the shop's earnings, but she tactfully declined. Henry became worried seeing the cafe so quiet at that time, but she smiled and explained that after the lunch rush at 12, everyone returned to work, and noted that Henry was usually the last visitor for lunch. He replied that if the cafe closed, it would be tough for him. It was a favorite resting place for such a busy official as himself. I wished Henry a productive afternoon at work after he recharged at the cafe. She watched his receding back and smiled to herself, knowing that Henry always liked his tea barely warm. Although Henry worried about the cafe's profits, Mai told herself she was not going to make the place too famous. Income from magic and the current modest flow of customers were quite enough for her peace. Henry promised to come again tomorrow. Mai gave him a radiant smile and said she would always wait, and when his figure disappeared, the capital's lights began to flicker. She set about clearing the huge pile of dishes and told herself, now is the time to practice magic before the evening rush. I combined modern knowledge with grandmother's magical teachings and summoned a stream of warm water at 70 C accompanied by a gentle breeze at 50 C to instantly wash and dry the dishes. She was incredibly satisfied. The convenience of magic allowed a novice like her to easily cope with the huge workload. Mai sat quietly looking out the window and thinking about life. She knew her place was in another world, but thanks to her grandmother she could now live fully. She perceived this new life as an unexpected, pleasant gift and always carried her grandmother's words in her heart, live with a smile. My joy was not only in the fact that I was alive, it also came when I saw clients enjoying the dishes and smiling happily. Phrases like delicious or the meat is so tender gave her a boost, and life suddenly seemed more beautiful and meaningful than ever before. In the castle, the evening bell rang 7 times, a sign that they were already stopping serving in the dining room. Henry sat thoughtfully at the table, his stomach growling, and he realized that the hiding place was probably closed. He sighed at the very thought of having to decide on his own what to eat for dinner, while the dormitory kitchen was probably they had already cleaned up. Henry walked the night streets and couldn't stop thinking about my little coffee shop. Although the food in the castle was decent, he had grown tired of it over the years. Meanwhile, the only joy he looked forward to every morning was Mai's daily changing menu, and he comforted himself with the thought that he would inevitably continue thinking about her. Henry tried to brush off the growing feelings, telling himself that he just liked her food and had no bad intentions, but dark memories of family and a large shadow with burning eyes burst into his heart, and he tormented himself with the thought that someone like him had no right to love anyone. Henry was afraid that if Mai found out who he really was, she would feel disgust and horror. he reminded himself not to hope too much, just to enjoy her smile and savor the dishes she cooked. He was walking in the darkness, persuading himself that tomorrow he would be able to go to the cafe again. When the capital had completely fallen asleep and the cafe had closed, I stood by the boiling stove slowly sipping a cup of tea, pondering what to cook tomorrow, and the story ended with the image of a peaceful cafe under the stars and the promise of another tomorrow. Next to this silently lay the secret of darkness that Henry carried within himself. Henry Howler was the chief civilian in the capital. He loved peace and wished for every day to pass calmly and predictably. But lunch in that small cafe became an exception. An incredibly tempting smell from inside instantly caught his attention. Mike greeted Henry with a radiant smile when he entered, quickly brought a glass of cool water and a salad with soup in a lunch set, and Henry was amazed at how wonderfully the well water tasted. He quietly wondered if some rich lady kept this shop for amusement, since all these trinkets were completely free. Mai served the main dish, Neapolitan pasta with sweet and sour tomato sauce, and Henry could not resist the bright colors and rich aroma of tomatoes, onions, bell peppers, and thinly sliced smoked meat. When he tasted the first piece, a rich broth combined with fresh vegetables fully satisfied him. Henry could not help but exclaim that everything was so delicious. He felt a little embarrassed when he noticed Mai's gentle smile, so he hurriedly cleared his throat to compose himself, then curiously asked about other dishes on the menu. It changes daily. Mai enthusiastically described today's katsu sando, a breaded pork sandwich, although it was already sold out, and he detailed the crispy pork cutlets generously spread with spicy sauce and placed between soft white bread. Henry felt that her menu was rich and exciting. He quietly thought that she was a skilled and incredibly hospitable owner in a place that always shone with cleanliness and calm. Henry sat thoughtfully at the bar counter, thinking that he had finally found the best establishment. He involuntarily remembered his mother who gave birth to him and wondered if she had ever tasted something so delicious. Memory returned to the moment when he was a baby adopted into the Howler Viscount's family and cherished as their own. Henry recalled an incident 3 years ago when he secretly hired someone to find his biological mother because he did not want his adoptive parents to be upset by their meeting. This woman, who was once just a laundress, told him how she caught the attention of his biological father. She openly told him about her fears due to a possible pregnancy and how lucky she was that at that difficult moment he did not reject her. Mother said that when she found out about the pregnancy, she immediately told Henry's father and left so as not to cause him problems. She hid their relationship and hoped he would forget her, and eventually, through an acquaintance, entrusted Henry to the Howler Viscount's family because she believed they understood people well. Henry listened with a heavy expression and quietly accepted the truth about his origin. Henry looked at his body and realized he inherited his physique and even his mind from his mother. The mother admitted that his intellect strangely resembled the intellect of his respected father. He silently felt gratitude. Appearance and intellect inherited from biological parents, combined with the careful upbringing by foster parents, became his strongest traits. Thanks to caution and always cold, calm temperament, Henry rose to the position of chief civil official by the age of 25. He always watched his actions to avoid making enemies and still hid his origin. 2 months later, Henry returned to the shop and cheerfully told Mai that today's dish was very tasty as well. Suddenly, Henry received an unexpected summons, an urgent meeting regarding the case of Lord Jusel. Although he found it strange why such a minor official was called, he quickly gathered documents and rushed on his way. His subordinates guessed that the higher-ups probably decided to rely on Henry's sharp mind to resolve matters with the mages, who often thought in some incomprehensible ways. Henry Howler confidently entered the conference room where senior officials had gathered, all with tense faces. Here Curious, the temporary head of the magic department, began reporting on the mysterious disappearance of the chief mage Jusel Litzli, who was considered missing along with a magical device still under development. This happened 5 months ago. Jusel vanished without a trace, taking with him a magic device funded by a huge state budget, and worst of all, the entire design existed only in his mind and was not recorded on paper. Henry quietly condemned the mage's negligence in handling state funds, while Karia meanwhile was seriously worried. After so many days, the chances of the chief mage surviving were extremely slim. The Minister of Military Affairs angrily demanded whether Jusel had researched instantaneous teleportation and disappeared into the unknown, but Kiri replied that Jusel was a man who loved secrets, so no one had clear information, and Henry observed the chaos and quietly became disappointed in the arrogance of those who possessed magic. Just then the king called Henry's name and asked him to frankly express his opinion as the chief civil representative. Henry directly presented a calculation of benefits and costs. Lidsley is the only one who knows how to use teleportation magic, and the supporting device disappeared with him, so further searches would only increase feudal losses. The king began to lean toward abandoning the search, but Kyria and other mages instantly flared with indignation, taking it as an insult. Henry sighed quietly. He had to waste time on pointless arguments, while his own work only accumulated. Henry suggested that the Department of Magic should bear proper responsibility for the loss before the case was closed. Kyria was stunned and firmly objected, saying it was absurd to make subordinates accountable for their boss's mistakes. Henry stood his ground. Until someone clearly takes responsibility, this case will never be resolved. Henry made the final decision to cut the Department of Magic's budget by 30% for the year, and this left Kyria completely broken and furious. He feared how to face his colleagues and report that the already meager budget was cut because of Lidsley's fault. Kyria shouted that he was not so easily persuaded, but the decision to cut the budget was still signed and approved. After the meeting, Kyria followed Henry, sobbing and accusing him of cruelty for cutting funds for those who worked hard, while Henry tried to stay calm and suddenly asked Kyria if she liked delicious food. He offered to take Kyria to a truly wonderful dinner to continue the conversation, instead of eating in the castle dining hall, promising that the dishes would be exceptionally special and rare. Leaning closer, Henry whispered in Kyria's ear that he would explain in detail how to restore the cut budget, and this instantly turned her anger into excitement and joy. Henry smiled to himself at her quick change but regretted a little. He did not want to bring acquaintances to my shop at all. He arranged to meet Kyria the next day at 2:00 p.m. and promised that the tastes would amaze him. It was to be the warmest hospitality from the best dining hall he knew. While Kyria rejoiced in anticipation of the delicious meal and the budget's return, Henry stood alone on the castle balcony and let out a long, tired sigh. Colleague official Gilsh approached and asked how the meeting ended, and Henry replied that the disappearance was finally resolved, although everyone was very busy, at least no longer drawn into that months-long case. Gilsh gladly invited Henry to go for a drink in the company of 8 people after the exhausting day, and Henry agreed to relieve some tension after the meeting. Meanwhile, Mai was diligently performing a new magical ritual next to an empty glass jar in the hideout. Mai was glad that she could finally create oil from rice bran using transmutation magic, which was discarded during rice processing in the city. This oil not only made stir-fries and fried dishes lighter and more aromatic, customers simply adored it. When she finished, she threw on a hooded cloak and prepared to leave. Mai admitted that lately she had been going on night walks more and more often, sometimes every night, because the silence of the empty house weighed on her, made her incredibly lonely, and made her long for the time when the TV was buzzing at home. And the radio from her old world. Although she talked to customers during the day, those were not the sincere conversations she missed to soothe her fading soul. Fearing that loneliness in this world would drive her insane, Mai decided to look for taverns, hoping to feel some human presence. She entered Romi's tavern, run by a beautiful, sincere hostess, and ordered a glass of barley vodka and some dried meat as a snack. The crowd's noise briefly eased her loneliness, but the emptiness still sat deep in her heart. Mai tormented herself over those huge secrets that she came from another world and could use magic. She understood that if this came out, the consequences would be unpredictable. Therefore, she could not truly trust anyone, quietly dreaming that there was someone in the world to whom she could pour out her soul and tell all her secrets. When a noisy group of visitors entered the tavern, Mai decided to pay Romi and leave, but just then, a familiar voice called her by name. Mai looked up in shock and realized that Henry was standing before her. This unexpected meeting closed that chapter, leaving them both stunned. In the tavern, Henry and Mai could not hide their surprise. They unexpectedly ran into each other near the cafe, and Henry, a little embarrassed, hesitated before asking if Mai was alone. She barely nodded, admitting that it was one of her favorite places. Henry looked a little confused, and then waved goodbye to me with an oar and rowed away as his colleague Gilsh urged him on because others were waiting. Henry suddenly broke away from his friends and quietly followed me when he noticed her walking alone down the quiet night street. She flinched at the sound of quick footsteps behind her, panicked thinking that someone treacherous was after her, and ran away. He retreated, overwhelmed by complete horror. At that moment, Henry jumped up stylishly and gracefully to get ahead of her and calm her down. Mai stood still in admiration of his run, every movement economical and almost artistic. Henry, concerned for her safety, offered to escort her back to the hideout. I, frozen with surprise, accepted his help. He sternly reminded that it is dangerous for a woman to walk alone at night and asked if she often went to that tavern. She, blushing, admitted that she went there several times a week, although in reality she went there daily, but was ashamed to say so. She confessed that although she did not like alcohol, the empty house and loneliness forced her to seek human warmth, and she shared the pain of losing her parents in an accident when she was 10. I told how she lived with her grandmother for 15 years until her death, then wandered the village before moving to the capital, suddenly realized she was talking under the influence of drink, hurriedly apologized for burdening Henry with her personal matters near his home, and wondered why the stray cats that always clung to her were nowhere to be seen this time. She explained with a sparkle in her eyes that caring for and loving stray cats in the capital was one of her few joys, passionately confessed her love for them, and said she really wanted to take one for herself but was afraid of becoming so attached that she would not be able to let go. Henry kept his face stone cold, and I thought he really was the kind who rarely shows emotions, although she opened up to him more than to anyone before. Looking at Henry's steady back in the night light, I wished he also loved cats. She passionately longed to find a kindred spirit with whom she could talk for hours about cute cats for her. That would be a balm for a wounded heart. Saying goodbye to him and asking Henry once more to be careful, Mai entered her house and, as he advised, carefully closed the door, smiling and waving toward his figure that was moving away and disappearing into the darkness. Then she treated herself to a sip of cool ginger beer to cheer up, quietly grateful that this new life gave her a chance to become a witch and meet interesting people. But the deeper the night grew, the more terrifying the silence of this world squeezed Mai again, making her feel completely lost and empty, despite the magical energy and steady job. The loneliness of a stranger who stood alone against the night remained a huge challenge for the young owner. The next morning I woke up with a long yawn because I stayed up late and told myself that I would definitely thank Henry when he came. A knock on the door announced the first client, and Mai froze in surprise. Henry came for the first time with a colleague from the castle. Henry called this place his favorite, and the colleague, looking skeptically at his hidden corner, only made the atmosphere in the shop even livelier. Carius doubted my skill, seeing how young I was, and Henry immediately assured that the food was really wonderful and that he forced himself to eat there only at lunch so that it would not interfere with work. Although busy, I heard Carius's rude remarks and was a little offended. Carius gasped upon learning that Henry goes to the store 6 times a week and teased him for his excessive love for that place, while Mai started preparing the ordered beef stew with vegetables. Harry was constantly grumbling about the magical department's budget cuts and suggested earning extra money making medicines or taking on community projects to somehow compensate for the losses, and Henry coldly replied that no decision would satisfy everyone and someone would have to be responsible for past mistakes. Kyria angrily called Henry a conceited elite young man, and he was not moved at all and focused on savoring the dish that was almost ready. When I brought out the dish, the aroma of rice bran oil spread through the room, and Kyria exclaimed with delight. Interested, he asked what kind of oil it was because it did not smell like ordinary lard at all, but I just smiled and kept it my secret. She thought how lucky she was that she had earlier purified the rice oil with magic. Carius was also a mage and would immediately notice any mistake. When he started bothering Mai, Henry intervened and reminded him to return to the table. Carius was completely conquered by the breaded pork with egg and marveled at how perfectly fried meat combined with the soft egg layer on top. Mai explained that locals usually do not like runny eggs, so she makes them fully cooked to please the taste, and Henry quietly watched as Carius ate heartily and felt that bringing a friend here was. It turned out to be the right choice. Kyria, he was 8, could not get enough and said it was the tastiest pork of his life. He even called my girlfriend and enthusiastically praised her talent. Henry was a little embarrassed by the way Kyria addressed him but was glad that his friend was satisfied. Kyria even wanted to try Henry's potato salad, but he was firmly refused. After lunch, Henry insisted that Kyria's return to the castle quickly, although he was still dreaming of dessert. Kyria could not take his eyes off the apple cream pie on the menu and insisted on buying all the remaining ones to take them to his colleagues in the magic department. Mai said she could pack them. Henry, though a bit irritated, yielded to his friend's wish. When I was about to wrap the box with the pie in the cloth, Kyria unexpectedly suggested leaving everything as it was so he could help. Kyria cast barrier magic around the box of pies. Mai shuddered because it was the first time she saw real magic of this world with her own eyes. Proudly, he explained that the barrier would preserve the pies like the best food wrap, and when he finished, he said goodbye to me and promised to return. She watched it go away, quietly admiring that amazing power her late grandmother once mentioned. Henry continued to often visit the shop to savor hearty beef stew with vegetables. He asked me if Carius ever caused her trouble. I smiled and said that Carius and his colleagues often came for apple cream pies and that made her very happy. She smiled and showed the dish of the day chestnut pie, adding that Henry, if he wanted, could buy the rest of the pies to take home as a gift. I recalled her grandmother's words, "The greatest happiness is when you put effort into creating something good for others." She put great care into the chestnut pie from careful preparation to baking and lately noticed she could read emotions on Henry's usually cold face. Her heart warmed especially when he tasted the new pastry and secretly praised its wonderful taste. It became a small daily joy for her. Suddenly Henry seriously asked Mai if Carias really did not bother her at all, and Mai, a bit surprised by such unexpected concern, replied that although Carias behaved like a child and was stubborn, he never interfered with the shop's work. Henry was silent for a moment, then said goodbye and left, leaving me to wonder why he brought Kyria here and why he now worried so much about his presence. Mai, recalling her grandmother's teachings and after many attempts, stirred the barrier magic and created a transparent protective film around the dishes. It was strong and beautiful, but Mai suddenly realized it was completely airtight. She thought that using this for self-defense would suffocate her faster than the attacker, so she quickly clapped her hands to dispel the magic white smoke dispersed over the table. To fix the airtightness flaw, Mike came up with adding a small ventilation hole for smoke at the top of the barrier so that air could circulate. She confidently performed the ritual that wrapped her entire body in a protective veil at a distance of 5 cm from the skin, and she felt safer walking alone at night. With self-satisfaction relying on her innate talent, she believed that even if bandits attacked, this invisible shield would leave her unharmed and, in her opinion, Carias, no matter how skilled he was, would hardly be able to do that. Carias, enjoying the egg roll, laughed and recalled that at 6 years old he had the same naive thoughts and got scolded by his magical mentor. He explained that making an invisible mesh barrier that breathes and protects at the same time is extremely difficult, and almost no one does it, and Mai, hearing this, buried her face in her hands out of shame for her ignorance. She quietly thanked the chestnut that Pie Henry once brought it lightened the mood, and everyone in the magic department rushed to ask for seconds because it was extremely tasty. Carias passionately insisted that Mai had a great reputation in the department and many wanted to invite her somewhere because she was both beautiful and could cook deliciously, but Mai heard this and was not happy. She had neither the heart nor the strength to start a romance in this strange world. She was afraid if she revealed the secret of her origin, she would be called crazy, and to live on hiding it and then fall in love it would be exhausting and a burden. When I refused invitations under the pretext that I wanted to focus on business, Kyria immediately figured it all out and called it just showmanship, then began pointing out strange little things that hinted she was indifferent to money, for example the thin glasses she used. Dear, a high-quality dining set perfectly identical in size, something an ordinary commoner could only dream of. He decided that her indifference to the money earned from selling proved she was not one of the common folk. Carias continued to expose how I immediately threw away slightly chipped things and replaced them with perfectly new ones, a pastime only wealthy ladies could afford. Mike just smiled to himself because in reality she used transmutation magic and easily restored old things to look like new. She told herself that she had underestimated the locals' insight and decided from now on to make her cups so that they looked like real knots. It is cheaper to avoid suspicion. Once, walking in an invisibility suit through the streets, Mai accidentally scared stray cats. They seemed to see a strange shell around her and scattered in panic. She vowed to improve the technique so as not to scare cats anymore. The hideout had been open for 5 months, and now it was December 29. Henry stood under the cold winter sky and told himself that tomorrow was the holiday at the end of the year. He squinted resolutely as if he had just made an important decision. She thought to herself that it was already December 29, and in this world too, they celebrated the 30th at the end of the month, just like in her old life, and she felt happy because the customs and holidays here reminded her of familiar ones, although she only knew about them from snippets of clients' conversations. She realized that she lacked ordinary knowledge about the Kingdom of Well-Knows and had no one to ask directly. Looking at Henry's receding back, she restrained herself. This was the first time she would have to celebrate the new year in a completely foreign world. Serving roasted lamb with apples, bread, and soup on the table, Mai asked Henry if they celebrated at the end of the year in the kingdom and if the courtiers had to work during the holiday. Henry hesitated, saying that many could ask for a day off, but his awkwardness suggested to Mai that something was strange here and it was not worth insisting. Henry found it difficult to explain that the next day those who were married or had loved ones usually spent time together, saying goodbye to the old year. I realized with surprise that tomorrow looked like Valentine's Day or like Christmas from her old world for couples. She quickly pretended as if she already knew this so as not to lose face, and Henry said that the lonely would gather with friends or some would still go to work. I thought to close the shop for the holiday because people would probably be on dates and no one would want to eat alone. When Henry suddenly sank into gloomy disappointment upon hearing that the shop would be closed, I immediately became embarrassed. She had no idea that he would be so captivated by her food that he would even be upset. Henry hurriedly explained that he still had to work tomorrow and the dining hall in the castle would be closed. If my shop was also closed, he would be in trouble. He planned to buy extra bread to somehow get through, but Mai noticed the disappointment under his emotionless face and immediately changed her mind. She said she would keep the shop open if Henry came. Henry beamed with joy and asked again, which made Mai quietly smile to herself at how sincere he looked. I suggested to Henry to order whatever he liked for tomorrow's festive lunch, but he said he wanted to try the dishes she loved the most and explained that every year on the last day he usually worked, ate dry bread, so the opportunity to have a proper lunch during lonely work was something to look forward to. Mai was surprised. Such a skilled and attractive department head had no one to meet the new year with. Henry casually replied that people often said he lacked warmth and was hard to approach, so being alone was quite natural for him. Mike retorted that Henry was actually very gentle and caring, recalling how he chased after her to take her home from the tavern. She even praised his running as extremely graceful, which made Henry blush a little and smile shyly. Mai suddenly realized that she had spoken too familiarly and hurriedly apologized. Fearing that Henry might misunderstand, he just quietly smiled at her, and from this sudden tension Mai became even more confused. In panic, she explained that she had no intention of seeing him as a romantic object. She simply liked admiring beautiful things, cats, flowers, and his appearance. The more she tried to explain, the more confusing her words became, and she felt increasingly embarrassed because she feared she had caused unnecessary misunderstanding. Henry waved his hand to calm her down. Don't worry, he said he understood her and was not offended. After saying goodbye, he promised he was really looking forward to tomorrow's lunch and left the shop. When Henry disappeared from sight, Mai fell into regret and blamed herself. She had been too frank and perhaps made such a polite man as Henry feel awkward. She told herself that praising his attractiveness was unnecessary. They were not courting, so she needed to somehow make amends. She decided to put her whole soul into preparing a wonderful lunch tomorrow as compensation. She clenched her fists to cheer herself up and gather herself again. On New Year's morning, Henry came to the shop looking attractive and unexpectedly gave Mai a large bouquet and a box of cookies, apologizing for making her open on the holiday. A little shy, Mai gladly accepted this caring gift from a familiar customer. Henry smiled joyfully, seeing that she accepted his gesture and was already ready for the special lunch prepared just for today. Mai brought a real feast to the table: beef steak, Neapolitan pasta, winter vegetable salad, spicy fried chicken, and a bunch of various appetizers. She said that in her family at the beginning of the year they always put out many delicious dishes, and she wanted to feel that warm nostalgia again. Henry was truly impressed by the sophistication of the dishes, although he modestly said that these were Mai's favorite dishes, not his. Mai carefully noted that she let the dishes cool a bit because she knew Henry could not handle food that was too hot and spicy. Henry flinched for a moment at the strange expression. I realized she had accidentally used a word from her old world and hurriedly explained that cat's tongue referred to people who cannot eat hot food. She apologized for the rustic expression, fearing to offend him, but Henry smiled and admitted that he really did poorly eat hot food. Henry invited Mai to sit and eat together so as not just to watch, and Mai gladly agreed. Henry felt happy that now he could enjoy her food immediately as it was served, rather than waiting alone for it to cool on other winter days. He joked that if cheese fondue were an enemy for people with a cat's tongue like him, he would still want to try it even if he got burned because it looked too tempting, and they both laughed, melting the tension and making the atmosphere gentler. Henry enthusiastically praised the luxurious New Year's dinner and remarked that Mai's family must be incredibly wealthy to celebrate like that. Mai smiled and denied that they were ordinary people. And then Henry surprised her. He told her that he was adopted from birth by the Howler family and his adoptive parents sincerely loved him. Mai held her breath when she learned that Henry came from the prestigious Howler family through adoption. He admitted that his biological mother also lives in the capital but is often lonely, so tonight he plans to visit her. He honestly added that being given up for adoption might sound sad, but he feels happy and grateful for his life, and Mai silently watched, understanding that he had entrusted her with something very personal, although a distant longing still smoldered in his eyes. Mai told herself that people in service understand. Every client has their own sorrow and their own pain. She thought that Henry must also have painful secrets, and she herself was no exception. She carried the secret of her transformation within. Being alive and feeling good here she already considered a great success, but decided to remain silent. She was afraid it would sound preachy. Henry realized that that day he was the only customer in the shop and quietly thanked Mai for not leaving him to greet the new year alone. They smiled and enjoyed the rare moment of the last day of the year. Henry said goodbye to me and waved with a smile, and she sighed with relief. She really managed to make his end of the year pleasant. Time flew by, January passed, and February came to the doorstep with its new customs, about which I still knew nothing. An enthusiastic shopper asked Mai if she would go to the upcoming Harem festival awaiting spring, and inspiredly advised that it was the best chance to dress up nicely and make her beloved fall in love with her again. I could only force a smile. This event was completely unfamiliar to her. Mai scratched her head, wondering what the spring waiting festival was and why it seemed everyone in the well-known kingdom knew about it. She decided she had to ask someone, but was afraid that such obvious questions would make her suspicious. Finally, she decided to visit Romy at the tavern because she believed Romy was reserved and did not meddle in other people's affairs. That evening, Mai entered the tavern and, as usual, ordered her usual drinks and dried meat. Mai hesitated, starting the secret question. This made Romy excitedly imagine romantic details, so Mai quickly explained that there was nothing interesting here. She just wanted to know on what scale and how the spring waiting festival would take place. Romy was stunned that Mai knew nothing about the festival, which had been celebrated in this country for centuries. After a brief surprise, she enthusiastically explained that this holiday marks the end of winter and the arrival of spring, and takes place on the second holiday day of February. Romy told how in the capital the main avenue is brightly lit by 2 rows of long torches and people stroll leisurely because they believe the flames wash away dirt and fatigue gathered in the body during the long winter. That the festival celebrates the fact that everyone safely survived the February cold and prepares them for the intense sowing season, and also that it is a day for lovers to spend sweet time together. Like Valentine's Day in my old world. Romy winked and wished me a pleasant time with that boy. I smiled and agreed, though inside I knew I was not planning any dates, but decided to agree with Romy's story to move the conversation along. She sighed with relief, almost slipped up, did not give herself away. She kept repeating to herself that ignorance of the simplest things about this world is frightening and can bring trouble at any moment. So she quickly paid and prepared to leave, so as not to get drawn deeper into the chat. When Mai was lost in thought, suddenly someone called her by name. She shuddered and thought someone had overheard their recent conversation, and was even more surprised to see Henry, who was standing there hurriedly pulling on a hooded cloak to go out. He smiled and greeted her, and Mai was stunned. She had not noticed him in the tavern before and stood not knowing how much of her conversation with Romy he had heard. I nervously asked if Henry had heard the whole conversation. Henry embarrassedly admitted that unintentionally his sharp hearing caught everything. His face became strangely serious, and he looked me straight in the eyes as if about to say something important. In the tavern, a suffocating silence suddenly fell. They both fell silent, and Henry quietly and uncertainly called her by name. Suddenly Henry's face changed color and he was seized by unbearable pain, as if a fierce spasm had broken loose inside. His eyes bulged with horror and his hand clutched his chest, trying to suppress the dark force that wanted to break out. Strange black stripes crawled across his skin, and ominous breaths of air twisted the atmosphere around him into something truly eerie. Henry only managed to apologize for abruptly cutting off the conversation, then turned and burst out of the tavern at a terrible speed. She froze in shock as his figure walking away disappeared behind the tavern doors, which slammed and surprised the other patrons. She was deeply troubled by what she saw. It hinted that Henry had serious health problems, and she wondered if he had overexerted himself listening to her confession. Mai, without hesitation, rushed after him, fearing that in such a weak state Henry might be attacked by someone treacherous on a lonely night. She ran calling his name through the dark alleys of the capital, but in vain. No trace. Suddenly she froze, seeing a pile of scattered clothes in the middle of the street. Horror gripped her. She recognized the clothes Henry had been wearing just minutes ago, and her heart tightened with fear that something terrible had happened. Trembling, Mai picked up the pieces of Henry's clothes and panicked, not understanding why his things were here while the man himself had vanished without a trace. She immediately thought he might have been kidnapped or attacked and was about to run to call for help. Just as she was about to leave, a deep, powerful voice sounded from behind, demanding that she not take the clothes, and I froze in place from fear. Mai slowly turned and nearly fainted from shock when she saw a giant black figure with glowing eyes blocking the entrance to the alley. It was a massive creature radiating incredible pressure, and she realized the voice she heard was Henry's, but the feeling seemed strangely connected. The creature stood in the darkness watching her every move, and she stood rooted, holding the clothes. In this tense moment, Mai gathered all her courage to look closer at the shadow hidden in the niche of the brick wall. She noticed that the creature was not at all inclined to attack, it was patiently waiting for something from her. The air became strangely quiet, and Mai began to feel the presence of a familiar spirit behind that frightening form. When the dim light of the lantern illuminated it, Mai froze. It turned out not to be a dark monster, but a huge cat with shiny black fur and noticeable stripes. The cat looked at her with sharp but inscrutable eyes, as if trying to speak to her and seeking understanding from its little mistress, and Mai stood enchanted, admiring its majesty and mysterious beauty. I hesitantly called "Kitten" and asked in a trembling voice if this creature had just spoken to me. The cat silently looked at me with a gloomy gaze near the window of the brick house, and Henry had completely disappeared, leaving only his clothes and this mysterious giant cat. Before Matthias was an unexpected turn and revealed the darkest secrets of the senior clerk's true face. Misted froze in the dark alley when that giant creature with bright eyes spoke. She had a fleeting thought about how much more there was to learn in this world of swords and magic. Even the existence of a talking cat was beyond her imagination. She shyly asked again if this creature had really just spoken to her. The cat, frowning sternly, decisively forbade her to take the clothes because if he returned to human form, he would be extremely embarrassed to be found naked. Mai was caught off guard when the cat said it was returning as a human, and she realized that although the voice was different, the manner of speaking was very similar to that of the person she knew. She looked at the clothes in her hands, then at the cat with distrust and asked if this creature was Henry, and the cat with large mysterious eyes replied that he was indeed Henry Howler, leaving Mai completely stunned by this impossible truth. I showed no fear. Instead, she was passionately curious why Henry had turned into a cat and whether such a thing even happened here. Henry, surprised by her unusual calm, said it was not normal at all, that the whole story was long to tell, and asked her to go home and not worry about him, because in time he would turn back into a human just as it had happened the first time when he was 5. But Mai, determined not to leave him in that state, insisted he tell her his story while they waited for his recovery, sat next to the giant cat, and admitted that it all seemed like a dream to her because she had missed cat moments in her life so much. Henry resolutely assured that it was completely genuine and that, despite the complexity, he would tell her the main points, while the little shopkeeper, resting her chin on her hand, listened with eager impatience in the hope of learning the elite clerk's secret firsthand. Henry began to discover that in this world there exists a rare race of beastmen creatures who can take both human and animal forms. Their ancestors once lived on an ancient continent across the sea, but on the new continent they are almost unseen and forced to hide their true nature, and he confessed that his birth mother was a feline beastman, and he himself is the result of a rare union between a beastman and a human. Henry admitted that he himself did not understand why, after so many usual years, he suddenly transformed today, just after feeling an unusual warmth. It was coming from the tavern. Henry sadly bowed his head and felt deep guilt for accidentally allowing me to witness the greatest secret he had always tried to hide. The giant black cat looked depressed. I felt sorry for him, but at the same time I felt an irresistible desire to touch that soft fur. She persuaded herself to control her anxiety because she knew it was Henry, not an ordinary cat. Mai sincerely comforted him, telling him not to worry too much. Everyone has secrets they don't want others to know. Mai gently smiled and suggested also to tell her secret so that it would be fairer and cozier for both of them, and she wondered whether such a reliable person as Henry truly should know the burden she had carried alone for so long. The giant black cat looked at her expectantly and replied that if the story would ease her heart, he would be very glad to listen to it. We enthusiastically proposed a little game to decide who would learn the secret. She hid the key in one of 2 clenched palms and said that if Henry guessed the right hand, she would tell him an extremely important secret, and Henry, surprised, asked if she was really ready to share such a heavy thing with someone like him. Mai smiled and explained that secrets cannot be told to just anyone, but keeping them inside when there is no one to share with is very tiring, and she really wanted someone to listen to her. Henry looked intently at Mai's hands and made his guess, and the little shopkeeper, still keeping a mysterious smile, asked once again if he really wanted to hear it. Henry nodded firmly because he believed he could be trusted, and when Mai slowly opened her palm and showed the key, she joyfully exclaimed he guessed right. This moment became the beginning of a deeper connection, as they prepared to exchange the most intimate secrets of their lives. I realized that Henry would not be able to immediately return to human form, so I invited the giant kitten to my home to warm up by the stove and talk calmly. Henry was stunned by such bold hospitality and only exclaimed in surprise. His voice trembled slightly with anxiety, but he willingly agreed to go with me to my little house. I could not contain her wild joy that she finally managed to bring home a talking giant kitten and quietly rejoiced in my soul. It was the most wonderful moment in her life. She carefully covered Henry with a blanket near the warm fireplace and served him hot tea, gently encouraged him to purr if he wanted, saying that this way she would recharge with cat energy for the days when she lacked it. Henry smiled inside at the strange phrase cat energy, but politely declined. Even in animal form he retained human consciousness. He promised never to eat mice and not to lose his head, asked her not to look at him while he drank to preserve some dignity. The mice smiled in agreement, and they sat down, preparing for the moment when she would reveal the greatest secret of her life. I looked into the flickering flame and boldly declared that she was not from this world, which made Henry, who was drinking, shudder and gasp in surprise. He quickly apologized for such a dramatic reaction and, interested, asked where she was from if not from here, and Mai explained that she came from a completely different world, which nevertheless had many cultural and historical similarities with this place. She told him how in her former world she traded food from a small stall until her health failed and life took a completely different path. Henry listened to her story about another world and how Mai's grandmother before reincarnation passed on magic and knowledge to her. He admitted that the idea of parallel worlds was hard to grasp, but sincerely believed that this grandmother must have been an extremely powerful witch to know this kingdom so well, and with interest asked who she really was. Mai said that her grandmother's name was Sasaki Ryo. She was 78 years old and nodded that Sasaki was actually her grandfather's surname, and the black cat thoughtfully pondered, feeling that this name evoked something important. I wondered if she was too hasty in saying she could do magic, but quickly dismissed this worry. Henry was so fascinated by the story about her grandmother. Henry said he could not yet draw conclusions about Ryo's person, but promised to investigate further. Time passed and Henry still could not return to human form, which made him increasingly anxious and helpless. She then offered Henry to spend the night at her place, because in such a giant beastly form he could not return to the dormitory. Henry was terribly embarrassed and firmly refused. He considered it inappropriate for a man to stay overnight in a woman's home. He even offered to sleep on the porch, but she persistently refused, fearing it would scare the neighbors. Faced with her determination, Henry bowed and agreed, sincerely thanking her for her kindness. Taking advantage of the moment while Henry became softer, Mai blushed and asked if she could touch his fur a little. Henry, a bit surprised, gladly agreed to indulge her feline passion. She burst with joy when she hugged the giant cat and felt the velvety softness of the fur she had dreamed of. She exclaimed with delight the touch of Henry was like stroking a leopard or a majestic lion, but strangely gentle. She really wanted to bury her face in his belly, but she quickly remembered to keep her distance because, after all, he was the respectable Mr. Henry. The black cat silently endured her excessive admiration with a hint of ineffable embarrassment. Fully filled with cat energy, Mai cheerfully wished Henry good night and returned to her room to rest, laughing at how she had been so worried earlier but could not forget the warmth of his fur. Lying in bed, she felt a faint scent of soap on his paws instead of the usual cat aroma and quietly recalled the signs of werewolves she had long overlooked. She fell asleep thinking that Henry was truly a sweet black cat. Unlike carefree Mai, the cat Henry fussed all night, tormented and blamed himself for this terrible day. He painfully remembered hearing Mai say she wanted to spend tender moments with her lover at the Harumachi festival. That pain and jealousy that burst from within flared up like a fire, engulfed his mind, and turned his body into a beast. Right in the tavern he realized he could no longer maintain his usual cold composure when it came to her. Henry tormented himself because jealousy had seized his mind to such an extent that he was ready to use claws and fangs to take me away from any other man, and he was horrified by his savage instincts, constantly reminding himself that if he harmed a person, his life and honor would be destroyed. But what affected him the most was that she was not afraid at all. Seeing his terrifying appearance, she treated him more tenderly than ever. She remained the most special woman he had ever met. Henry understood. The more tender Mai was to him, the more miserable and unworthy he felt, and he was tormented by the thought that, like a half-beast, he had long given up hope for true love and never allowed his heart to beat for anyone until he met her. Although his feelings grew every day, he decided to bury this secret and never confess, fearing it would ruin their relationship. He could only silently accept the truth and cherish those brief moments beside her. Henry immersed himself in tender thoughts about Mai and convinced himself that he truly liked her while she was still brightly smiling, carrying a basket of bread to feed him. The huge black cat curled up into a ball and lay in bliss, feeling the gentle scent of Mai on its soft fur, which had not yet faded. Henry thought that Mai seemed to adore his werewolf form, but he was a little offended that she treated him only like a cat. He sprawled on the carpet by the fireplace, half happy, half embarrassed. His eyes were full of tenderness as he looked at my sleeping back and silently hid another secret about the trembling of his heart. The next morning at dawn, I woke up with a long yawn and stretched contentedly after a deep sleep, hurried downstairs and knocked on the living room door to greet Henry, but froze when I saw a huge cat face looking at me. Henry's blue eyes showed anxiety. He was sweating profusely and still could not return to human form as he hoped. I realized the matter was serious when Henry remained in his werewolf body. He sincerely apologized for the inconvenience caused and persistently asked Mai to help write a letter to the family to explain the situation, and the black cat clearly looked depressed and helpless, forced to rely on his little mistress in such an awkward circumstance. She cheerfully prepared a generous breakfast, fried eggs, bacon, broccoli, and raisin bread so they could share. Since Henry in that form could not use cutlery, she gladly offered to feed him by hand. Henry, though very embarrassed and shy, closed his eyes and accepted her caresses under the influence of her radiant enthusiasm. They had a strange but warm breakfast, and I was filled with joy that I could take care of this special kitten. Henry decisively announced that while he could not return to human form, he would take a leave from work and ask his adoptive father to contact his place of service. He asked Mai to rewrite the letter and deliver it to the Howler Viscount's manor estate. This momentarily surprised her when she confirmed his noble title. She felt an invisible distance when she realized that Henry really belonged to a different social circle, and she was a simple person and quietly felt sad about this difference. Mike brought Harry's letter to the grand gates of Henry's family estate and froze at their grandeur. She thought this was exactly where Henry grew up, and in front of the formidable iron gate, she felt very small inside. The guards and servants were worried when they heard that the young master was about to leave. The chief butler immediately brought Mayan to the master and handed over the important letter. Viscount Howler, stern in appearance but noticeably worried, read it and asked May about Henry's condition. She sincerely confirmed that Henry was at her home and still had not recovered, and this made the Viscount sigh with relief because at least his son was safe. He smiled to himself at his son's stubbornness and sincerely thanked May for helping Henry in trouble. He looked intently into her eyes as if checking whether he could trust the woman who cared for his son. Mai firmly assured that she would keep the secret about Henry's beastliness and would not ask for a reward, because to her, he was a very important guest. Viscount Howler smiled with relief and decided to send a carriage with a butler to pick up Henry to the estate, but secretly doubted whether after this Henry would even want to leave Mai's little inn and return to a restrained, limited life. Life of the aristocracy. Henry was tormented by terrible guilt because his case forced Maida to temporarily close the shop, but Maida only smiled to calm him, said that resting a little was normal, and asked him not to worry. Shortly after, Viscount Howler came in and, seeing his son unharmed, sighed with relief, looked carefully at Henry and noticed that although this transformation resembled that childhood high fever, he was now fully conscious and showed no signs of fatigue. I stood aside and watched the sincere care of the adoptive father for Henry, and the butler quickly arranged for the two men to be alone and talk. Viscount Howler thoughtfully explained that since werewolves were almost non-existent in this kingdom, those with such blood had to completely hide their identity to avoid trouble, and admitted that due to little contact between countries, almost nothing was known about them. He said that Henry was the only human-beast hybrid he had ever met, and when we were stuck on the hopeless question of how to return Henry to his former appearance, I suggested, maybe we should find his birth mother. She might know the answers. Viscount Howler immediately rejected this idea as impossible, saying he did not know where Henry's mother might be. Mai was surprised because she remembered Henry saying that he sometimes secretly met with her. Henry's cat trembled slightly and signaled to Mai not to tell this so as not to hurt the adoptive parents. As soon as the Viscount left, he quickly asked Mai to talk alone and confessed that he did not want to upset his adoptive parents, so he had been hiding the fact that he continued to see his birth mother. Looking at Henry's seriousness, Mike quietly felt his tenderness and filial devotion. He never cursed either his fate or the people around him. She noticed the boundless love of the Howler family from the Viscount to the butlers and guards, and this dispelled the feeling of distance, instead giving rise to a desire to help him. Henry hesitated and said that although he had troubled her greatly, he still had one last request, and I could fulfill it. Henry asked Mai to secretly leave the estate with him that night and go to the mother who gave birth to him. He explained that he needed to personally hear from her a direct explanation about his werewolf condition in order to find a way to resolve it. I was afraid of the danger of secretly slipping out of the house, but Henry insisted I had an important reason related to the family's safety. He whispered a shocking truth. The true status of his father directly affected the position of him and his mother. Henry confessed, Although his adoptive father hid the truth, he felt that the real father must have been a very influential nobleman since he so carefully entrusted him to the Viscount's family, and he feared that if people found out about him, danger would threaten not only him but also his birth mother, who would be drawn into a ruthless struggle for power and inheritance. Because he wanted to protect his mother and keep her safe from noble scandals, Henry was ready to take a small risk to expose the truth. Mai listened quietly and felt the heavy burden on the young man's shoulders. It seemed cruel to me that the gods constantly burdened gentle, kind people like Henry and her grandmother with such heavy loads. She decided to go with him, and they agreed to secretly meet at night to begin the search for the truth. Henry said that his mother's name was Carlotta and that today she worked as a servant in the women's academy dormitory. Mai suddenly realized how important she was to the plan. She was the perfect cover to approach his mother. Late at night, at a quiet meeting, a woman with an elegant, kind appearance appeared and introduced herself as Carlotta. Mai froze at her mature beauty and sighed with relief that everything went well. Carlotta anxiously asked why her son had come to her so suddenly at night. At that moment, the cat Henry jumped out of the shadows and called Mom, which stunned Carlotta, but she quickly recognized her son. Carlotta was not afraid. She gently stroked and praised Henry even in his cat form, saying that he was still handsome and had the posture of a dignified adult cat, and Henry awkwardly explained that he had a big problem since night he could not return to human form and begged her to show him how to turn back. Mai watched from afar and listened with interest as Henry spoke to his mother in tender, intimate words. Carlotta pressed her son's cat-like face to herself and gently kissed him to soothe his anxiety. Carlotta laughed and said she thought Henry would remain a cold person all his life, but this sudden turn proved otherwise. She asked who Mai was, and when she learned that it was she who took care of Henry, she beamed with delight, looked at her son with a knowing gaze, and declared that Henry had finally entered the rut season. The word love stunned both Henry and mate sounded completely unexpected. Carlotta Kumlai gently explained that when the mating season comes, cat werebeasts automatically transform into animals. Usually at 12-13 years old, they begin to learn to control this transformation at will, and she reassured her son that he would soon master this ability. Hearing this, Henry panicked and feverishly asked his mother to stop so he could process the shocking news. He urgently asked if there was any way to quickly return to human form, while Mai quietly stood and watched the mysterious conversation. Carlotta remembered that she still had old medicine, though old. It was still effective, so she quickly got it for her son and told Henry in his condition to take 3 tablets at a time, chewing them to immediately return to human form. Henry, noticeably relaxed, could not remain like that forever, especially since he was a busy servant in the castle. Carlotta gently stroked Henry and assured him that turning into a cat was not an illness but a natural thing. She thought Henry must have been terribly worried because he was adopted as a child and did not know his family. Carlotta sincerely thanked Mai for always being there and helping her son in difficult moments, hoped Mai would continue to support Henry, and said she could come to her with any problems. Mai was touched by Carlotta's kindness and promised to always be a reliable support for Henry. Henry gently looked at his mother and promised that he would soon come to her again in human form. Carlotta smiled, seeing them off, and secretly praised Mai as an exceptionally sweet girl. On the way home, Mai sighed with relief. Henry had medicine, and she asked with curiosity if he wanted to take it immediately, and Henry quickly agreed and asked Mai to help him put 3 pills into his mouth, because in cat form he couldn't hold them himself. Cat Henry opened his mouth wide. Mai couldn't help but freeze in surprise. His threateningly sharp fangs seemed to her like real weapons of werewolves, used for defense and fighting enemies in the most dangerous moments. Mrs. Carlotta said that the claws and fangs of werewolves are not only for defense but also weapons to drive away rivals or chase those they love. When Henry was chewing the medicine, he remembered his mother's words and felt unexpected anxiety, and Mai shuddered and worried when he suddenly grabbed his head and groaned, not knowing if the medicine was too bitter or if he was in pain. Only then did Henry realize with horror that he had made a stupid mistake. He took the medicine and forgot that he was naked. She panicked, tore off her coat, and handed it to Henry. Because a terrible guilt was eating her soul, it was she who pushed him to take those pills without thinking, and she was to blame for her carelessness, while Henry felt deep shame for this rare mistake, feeling his body beginning to return to human form. Henry urgently begged me to look away. She immediately obeyed and anxiously waited while a strange sound of transformation echoed around them. Henry stood motionless in the dark, returned to human form, but was dressed only in my long cloak and felt completely humiliated. He hid his face in shame and considered himself pathetic in this absurd state. She turned around and, seeing Henry suffering, hurried to calm him, whispering that it was just an accident. She barely restrained laughter at his strange clothing and thought he looked both pathetic and a little innocent at the same time. Henry painfully admitted that he would usually never make such a stupid mistake and felt so humiliated that he had nothing to show up before Mai with. He thought that all this time he had shown her his worst, most shameful sides, but Mai smiled kindly and said not to worry after all. The main thing was that he was normal again. She reminded Henry that it was very cold, so they needed to quickly return to the hideout to warm up. Henry slightly nodded, took my bag and promised to wash the coat and return it to her. Henry looked at Mai with grateful eyes and promised to properly thank her. He said that for 25 years he had carried the secret that he was a werewolf, and the understanding and acceptance from Mai along with his family saved him. Mai waved it off and said there was no need to thank, she was just glad they became friends who share secrets. She even said that Henry could calmly call her Toyskin, that intimate form he was used to calling his mother, because it made their relationship seem closer and more natural. Henry blushed slightly, smiled, and said goodbye to me, returning to the mansion. She stood by the window, waved to him, and asked him not to catch cold because the night was very cold. Henry still persistently asked Mai to take care of herself, then turned and walked into the quiet night. As Mai closed the door and sighed with relief after a long evening, she suddenly sneezed loudly and worried that she might catch a cold soon after all the recent troubles. Late that night, after parting with Carlotta and her son, she returned home and suddenly fell ill. A high fever rose. Fortunately, before her strength left her, she managed by transformation magic to make 2 hot water bottles from old ceramic plates instead of taking her expensive iron pot. Lady Delirious, wrapped in thick blankets, wandered in delirium and wondered if she had lost immunity against the world's viruses. Thirst urged her, and she wanted to magically summon a glass of cool water, but during the illness she lost control over mana and accidentally created a huge stream that soaked both the bed and her clothes. The next morning, a closed sign hung on the door of the hideout which surprised passers-by and worried the young hostess because it was the first sudden closing since the opening, and without the familiar kitchen smells, the street corner became strangely quiet. Mai struggled to get up and go downstairs because the bed upstairs had turned into a real pool. She silently thanked Old Go and his wife for basic survival skills Obai and the ability to make fire with hands because she did not dare to use magic again, fearing to cause a fire. In the trembling fever, dark days in the hospital from her past life surfaced in her memory when she helplessly watched death creeping closer. It hurt me to think that she was given a second chance at a healthy life, and she again had to face physical weakness. In the loneliest and most desperate moment, Mai heard a panicked knock on the door and someone outside calling her name. Recognizing Henry's voice, she forced herself to get up and open the door. Henry, scared and worried, stood by the closed shop and kept calling her name as if he wanted to make sure she was okay. As soon as he saw her with a burning, feverish face, Henry hurriedly lifted her up and sighed with relief seeing that she was alive. He blamed himself for lending her his coat and that she might have caught a cold because of it, but she quickly calmed him with a weak breath. When Henry placed his large, cool hand on her forehead to check her temperature, Mai felt a little calmer and silently wondered why she was lying on the floor and not in bed with such a high fever. Mai weakly smiled and told Henry to go have lunch and not to worry about her, but Henry insisted that she was not okay at all. He helped her sit up and asked her to wait by the stove while he prepared warm onion soup he had just bought. Henry gently scooped the soup with a small spoon and asked her to drink a little to gain strength, warning that dehydration is very dangerous at high temperatures. Though swallowing hurt, Mai still felt the warmth of the soup and his sincere care. Interested in his lunch, she asked, and Henry admitted that he had only bought a simple bun to have a quick snack, and this soup was made especially for her. Henry kindly suggested she take a little nap and promised to stay and watch the fire, and Mai was deeply touched when she heard him use the pronoun she had asked for yesterday. It showed that he was a person who keeps his word and has discipline. The loneliness and cold that had just gripped her melted away, replaced by the warmth of the cloak Henry threw over her. Mai fell asleep with complete peace in her heart, knowing that now she would not have to fight the illness alone. When she woke up after a long sleep, Henry was still sitting nearby, looking at her with worried eyes and quietly greeted her as soon as she opened her eyes. Mai asked about Henry's work at the estate, and he proudly said that he had officially taken leave and decided to return home earlier to take care of her. She felt a little guilty for troubling him at work, but his presence quietly comforted her. In a half-dream, Mai, whenever she became too weak, recalled the medical equipment from her old world. Seeing that she was sweating heavily, Henry offered to carry her upstairs so she could change into clean clothes and be more comfortable. Henry picked Mai up in his arms like a prince and asked where the bedroom was, and she shyly pointed to the stairs. As they moved, Henry suddenly asked if her lover knew about the illness, and Mai froze in surprise as she had no idea who he was talking about. Henry sincerely promised that if anyone asked about his presence, he would testify that nothing improper had happened between them. I just rolled her eyes in disbelief and quietly screamed inside, wondering who this supposed lover could be. She could have sat down and explained the misunderstanding about the lover, but she was too exhausted and decided to postpone this troublesome conversation. Seeing her suffering, Henry advised her not to worry about him. His semi-beast blood makes him strong and resilient. I smiled in agreement and silently thanked the sincere official for his diligent help. Just as the atmosphere quieted, a knock on the door and loud noise outside frightened them both. Suddenly Carius appeared, banged on the window, and shouted, asking what had happened there, which greatly irritated Henry with his untimely noise, and explained that he had come to the estate looking for Henry, heard that he left earlier, and assumed he could be found in Mai's shop. When Carius learned that Mai had a high fever, he was eager to secretly bring restorative potion from the magic department so she would recover quickly, but Henry immediately stopped him, reminding him that taking government supplies without permission is a serious violation of the rules. Henry fell silent, recalling the restorative remedies Mai's grandmother had talked about, and insisted that these were extremely rare medicines, strictly warning Carius not to do anything that could get Mai into debt or get her into trouble with the law. Carius insisted that one small bottle would slip by unnoticed, but when Henry became firm and authoritative, the young mage backed down. Henry himself promised to take care of me only by the safest and legal means. Arya fell silent from Henry's determination and suddenly realized how especially he cared about their mistress. Mai lay in bed watching and silently thanking Henry for always protecting her from unnecessary troubles, and when Kyria left, a quiet gloom hung over the shop, and Henry remained serious and thoughtful, wondering if those magical means were really so wondrous that people risked their careers to obtain them. After a long time, feeling much better, I took a candle and went downstairs. Henry was still standing with a worried face. She gently inquired about him and said that after sleep she felt much better, and Henry quickly asked if she wanted anything prepared, because she needed to regain strength after the fever. Mai shyly said she wanted a steaming bowl of rice porridge, and Henry gladly agreed to try his hand in the kitchen if she would teach him. I patiently guided him, and Henry began awkwardly taking the first steps, rinsing the rice and cooking the porridge. Mai watched his diligent figure by the sink and involuntarily recalled warm family memories from her past every time she was ill. She remembered her parents' encouragement that she was a strong child and would quickly overcome any illness. The painful images of the car accident that took them when she was 10 resurfaced and squeezed her heart from the immense loss. She nostalgically recalled the 15 years spent dependent on her grandmother before a cruel illness transferred her to this strange world. She believed her life had always been fragile, and attachments to loved ones too short, so from a young age she decided never to allow herself to let someone get too close to not experience loss again. However, Henry's overwhelming tenderness and care slowly broke down the walls around her heart, and she wondered how much longer he would stay before the true secrets of their personalities were revealed. When Mai looked at Henry's focused face, it suddenly became clear to her. Losing loved ones was like tearing a part of herself away, and she was not sure if she could recover if it happened again. Henry caught the change in her eyes and gently asked if something was bothering her. Mai hastily hid her weakness and, to distract herself, asked why last night, when she revealed her secret, he did not ask if she knew how to use magic. Henry calmly replied. Henry answered that perhaps he was not as knowledgeable about this world as she thought, and explained. In this kingdom, many people are born with mana and are respected from childhood, but learning magic and making it a life's work is incredibly difficult. Only true geniuses can manage it, so the question, do you know how to use magic, can be delicate and painfully strike the pride of those who have mana but cannot skillfully apply it. Mai's eyes widened with surprise when she learned that there were only 9 elite members in the castle's magical department, and Kyria was one of those powerful figures. Finally, Henry brought me a steaming bowl of rice porridge with slightly sweet and spicy minced meat. Tasting the first spoonful, I felt unexpected warmth in my chest and silently praised his hidden culinary talent, then sincerely apologized for being too confident in my condition and troubling him all day. Henry admitted that he has rarely been sick since childhood, only sometimes overworks himself, and jokingly asked Mai if his fatigue from caring for her was visible. I anxiously asked if she had said something that offended him, and Henry smiled tenderly and replied that he was not angry but rather thoughtful about himself. He confessed that upon learning he was a half-beastman, he worked twice as hard so that no one would look down on him, sometimes pushing himself to the limit, but Mai's care taught him to stop and rest in time. When he was sure that Mai's fever had subsided and she could rest, Henry whispered to her, "Sleep well," and quietly left to restore peace in the little shop. When the clock struck 9 and the night grew deep, Mai's health noticeably improved. When she swallowed warm water, Kairias appeared again with a mysterious, worried look, and rejoiced that Mai was more lively, instantly took out from his word a vial with a dark, shimmering liquid, which he enthusiastically called a highest-grade restoration elixir. He said he had fought hard to bring it and was not lying at all. The magical department has special priorities for senior members, so his possession of it is completely legal. The approval procedures were too complicated, so he could only bring it now. Although he knew that if given earlier, the effect would have come faster, Mai blushed and offered to pay. But Kairias quickly refused, saying it was a gift for the cook who always made him delicious dishes, and the mischievous mage teasingly asked why Henry was allowed to go on vacation too. Care for her stopped while Kiria brought the potion. Mai froze. She saw a real restorative potion for the first time and felt powerful mana bursting from within. Kiria added that similar potions are sold on the market, but they only slightly soothe and cannot compare to the special potion of the magical department. He explained that to create a potion with such amazing effects, the caster needs an incredibly large amount of mana, otherwise he instantly exhausts himself. Mai listened silently and thought that if she understood the potion's structure, her transmutation magic could help many more people. Mai asked with interest about the ingredients, and Kairia enthusiastically listed 6 rare herbs: spirit grass, poisonous scourge, dragon dew, blue leaf, black leaf, and triangular grass. He explained that the secret of survival is the exact ratio of herbs and mana waiter, knowledge mastered only by experienced mages, and Mai felt that this list perfectly matched what her grandmother Ryo had left in memory, so she wondered why such an obvious formula was controlled so strictly. As Henry warned, Kairia fell silent and told a tragic story. 2 previous princes died from an epidemic caused by poor quality restorative potions, and since then the king issued decrees strictly controlling both the quantity and quality of potions to guarantee absolute safety for the royal family and the army. Mai finally understood the historical background of that little bottle and why her grandmother's generation knew nothing about these strict rules. Kairia, insisting that Mai immediately drink the potion and recover, cheerfully said goodbye and vanished into the night darkness. She sadly sat alone before the shimmering vial and wondered if it would be illegal if she prepared that potion with her own magic. She so wanted to use her power to help others, but she was afraid of causing trouble for Henry and the stash. Eventually curiosity won, and she took a small sip to check the taste and effect. As soon as the liquid touched her tongue, she grimaced. The taste was too sharp and disgusting. She gasped in surprise because the bitterness was eerily familiar, exactly like the vegetable juice of Ijiru from her old world. The strange taste of the potion suddenly awakened a distant memory of her native grandmother in Tokyo. On hot summer nights they walked under the full moon, and her grandmother gently persuaded her to drink the bitter vegetable juice to strengthen herself. The tender image of her grandmother with the cat Yatero under the shining city lights surfaced in her memory and brought tears of homesickness. She realized that there might be some mysterious connection between this world's healing potion and her grandmother's vegetable juice that she could not yet unravel. Standing before the mirror with a radiant appearance, Mai happily announced that she was completely cured of the fever, so she decided to keep the shop closed for another day and cast an invisible protective charm around her body to keep warm. Mike dragged her homemade wooden cart to the capital market, determined to buy ingredients to research and prepare a restoration potion herself. Summary of knowledge appeared. Restorative potions are very effective medicines for wounds and diseases, but only those who have mana can prepare them. Nearby, Chibakiria appeared and explained that the base is water created by water magic mixed with herbs, and he boasted that he had converted the bottle from an elegant antique flask to a simple glass test tube. It is easier to clean and store. Mai entered the Ulta herbal shop with surprise. Was in a specialized ingredient section for the first time, not in the food section, so she asked the seller about herbs like bright leaf and dragon rest for making potions, and a list of ingredients appeared before her. Bright leaf for cough, poison bane for stopping bleeding. Dragon rest relieves pain, and triangle weed and clear face prevent infection from developing. Having bought 10 bunches of each, she cheerfully pulled the cart home to start her experiments. Mai began by boiling empty bottles in a large cauldron, sterilizing them according to modern medical knowledge, and was delighted was making magical treatment herself for the first time. Using water magic, she filled the bottles with water, laid out the herbs on the table, and began casting the transmutation spell. The water in the bottle slowly took on a deep green color, and Mai was stunned into silence. She took a sip and felt a bitter, unpleasant taste like vegetable juice her grandmother Ryo forced her to drink in the old world. Mai was moved as soon as she remembered how she was sick in Tokyo, and her grandmother cared for her daily and gave her homemade vegetable juices. Suddenly she realized that those drinks were probably the healing elixir made from Japanese herbs that her grandmother prepared to save her life. Although that remedy could not cure the incurable disease, she still remained deeply grateful for her grandmother's care. Because of her situation, she decided she must find Kiria to thank him for the useful information. In the castle corridor, Kiria rushed to Henry, grabbed him by the shoulder, and sobbing, complained that the army was forcing him to urgently hand over 400 bottles of healing potion. She begged Henry, as head of the civil authority, to intervene and negotiate with the military to break the supply into batches, but he coldly replied that she must negotiate personally. It would be faster and more effective than through intermediaries. Kiria wailed that army officers would never listen to such a young mage as he was, and Henry secretly sympathized with the heavy burden Kiria had carried since Archmage Lee disappeared. Henry proposed a deal, insisted that Kiria honestly answer one question about magical knowledge. Thoughtfully, he asked if an ordinary person can transfer their mana to another, and Kiria explained that this happens only in very rare cases when the giver has an exceptionally high technique and the receiver has a compatible constitution to absorb it. The most important thing was that the two had to be closely related by blood for the mana to take. Hearing this, Henry pondered, and Kiria, interested in why he was curious about details that only occur in popular novels about mages, asked him about it. Henry asked a more difficult question: is it possible to teleport a person over a long distance without a magical device? Kiria assured that in theory it is possible using displacement magic, but in history no one has ever achieved it. He recalled the famous tale about the mage Sir Grid, the teacher of his mentor, who was knowledgeable in this and through his experiments brought great misfortune upon his beloved. Henry's face turned pale and tightened with tension at this detail. He doubted because he had heard this story from his father but found no records in the archives. Kiria explained that since the victim's body was never found, the incident was not publicly recorded and remained only a rumor. He told that it happened about 50-60 years ago when Archmage Grid was testing instant teleportation magic on his beloved. The target was very close and visible to the naked eye, but after the spell the girl simply disappeared and was never found. Rumors say due to technical error she was thrown either deep underground or to the bottom of the ocean. Arias added that after that tragic accident, personal research on displacement magic became taboo among mages, so he and his colleagues now study displacement only using approved devices to ensure safety and serve the kingdom, while Henry silently considered both Grandmaster Grid and Master Lidsley vile for being ready to sacrifice others or flee with national artifacts. And Kiria agreed, admitting that he understood their desire to experiment when their bodies and mana were at their peak. The conversation ended with him looking anxiously at the boundaries of magic, because the connection between Grandma Mai and this world was becoming clearer. Henry fell silent and realized he could not completely hate the Archmage he once cared for him and taught him in childhood. Suddenly Henry unexpectedly asked Kiria if he remembered the name of Grid's missing beloved, and Kiria ran his hand through his hair, strained his memory, but eventually apologized, "I don't remember." Meanwhile, Henry began gathering facts and rummaging through archives searching for records about people with great mana to find Grandma Myrio. The archival file revealed the story of a girl named Heller from the village of Obai, daughter of a poor peasant family. The record stated that the parents supposedly died of illness, but there were suspicions that she was sold. Heller was a typical child with great mana born in poverty, and at 7 years old disappeared without a trace. Henry shockingly realized that if that girl were alive, she would now be exactly 78, and this perfectly matched the age of my grandmother Rio, as described by Maya. Henry quietly watched Mai and thought to himself that she was not as lonely in this world as she seemed. He hesitated whether to tell her that she was indeed brought back to her grandmother's homeland to ease her loneliness. But Henry quickly dismissed this thought. He did not want to burden Mai with unverified information about her ancestor. When he pondered and froze, Curious called him sharply back to reality and made him apologize for his confusion. Interested, Curious asked Henry for the name of that novel with the mono-transfer plot that he mentioned to read. Henry awkwardly admitted he did not remember the title and promised to check later. Curious cheerfully said goodbye and returned to work, believing that the honorable official Henry would manage to persuade. But after running a few steps, Curious suddenly stopped, sharply turned around and shouted loudly because he just remembered something important. From afar, Curious shouted that he remembered the name of the missing beloved of Sir Grid Rayal. The name Rayal echoed down the corridor, and Henry froze in surprise. And when the name Rayal turned out to be the same as Grandma Maya's Rayal, the mysterious pieces began to fit together eerily well. Henry instantly put the whole matter together and suspected that Rayal, Grid's beloved, was the same girl who disappeared at 7 years old, and also that Rayal was actually Grandma Maya, sold by her family, then used by Grid as a test subject for teleportation magic and accidentally pushed into Maya's world. Henry wondered if Maya could feel even a drop of joy learning about her grandmother's cruel, tragic past. In the end, he decided to keep it a secret for now. As a senior civil servant, he felt the need to dig deeper to establish the facts precisely. Standing before a mountain of papers, Henry felt intuition whispering to get to the truth. And soon, sitting in his office working, a soldier came in to inform him of a letter from Viscount Gawler. Henry quickly opened it, and mentally admired how always efficient his adoptive father was, because the letter was about a veterinarian named Gonza, a person connected to his past. At dinner in the tavern, Henry told Maya that 20 years ago, when he first turned into a cat due to a high fever, his adoptive father did not rest, searching for and bringing Dr. Gonza to treat him. Dr. Gonza was well versed in the peoples of the beast folk and then gave the Viscount family invaluable advice, and the medicine given to him by Carlotta's birth mother turned out to be a hereditary remedy without a known recipe. To somewhat ease Maya's anxiety about the medicine supplies, Henry asked his father to find Dr. Gonza, hoping that he could reproduce that remedy. Henry reported that Dr. Gonza might live in a village near the capital, so for the next holiday he decided to visit him both to train and to gather the necessary information. He hesitated a little and asked Maya if she wanted to join the trip. Maya instantly exclaimed with excitement and insisted that she really wanted to go, which briefly surprised Henry. He accepted her consent, somewhat embarrassed. The atmosphere suddenly became shy but warm. Maya hid her face and awkwardly explained that after a severe illness she realized she needed to go out and learn more about the world, not just stay in the capital and the village. Henry thought she was extremely sweet and gladly agreed to go with her. They quickly agreed on the time, and Maya was thrilled that Henry allowed her to go out. After seeing me off, Henry remained alone in the tavern, lightly squeezed my hand and whispered good with a very satisfied look. The secret date plan worked wonderfully. At the festival, Henry placed Maya together with himself on a white horse and rode to Dr. Gonza. Maya was delighted. It was her first time riding a horse, and Henry gently asked her to speak up if anything was wrong, while mentally sensing the subtle scent of her hair. Finally, they reached a quiet farm on the outskirts of the capital and met a good-natured bearded man named Dr. Gonza. In a cozy living room with steaming cups of tea, Dr. Gonza smiled, recognizing in Henry the same little cat he once treated. Now he had become a very polite gentleman, and he added in a friendly manner that he had received a generous payment from the Viscount back then, so Henry need not worry about the debt. When Henry asked for a remedy to suppress the ability to transform, Dr. Gonza firmly refused, explaining that such medicine has extremely serious side effects. Constant use can make werebeasts infertile. Henry froze when he realized Gonza's explanation exactly matched what Charlotte's real mother had warned him about. Gonza gently advised that transforming into a cat is a natural manifestation of the body, not a disease, so it is best to learn to live in harmony with one's instincts rather than forcibly suppress them with medicine. I looked anxiously at Henry when he admitted that it seemed there was no way to escape his fate. Dr. Gonza signaled that they both should keep the next revelation a secret. Gonza revealed a shocking truth. Although everyone thought that werebeasts were almost non-existent on this new continent, this was not true. He said that only in the capital and its surroundings, at least 100 werebeasts were hiding among people. Both Henry and I could not hide our amazement at the huge number Gonza named. Gonza sighed and said that only in his clinic he had treated at least 10 different werebeasts. He explained that they have an instinct to expand their territory, so it was understandable why they left the ancient continent in search of new lands, but here they have to hide their true nature to live peacefully. I wondered how Gonza knew so much about the people of the beasts. I heard him lower his voice and confess that he had lived on the ancient continent until he was 30. Henry, and I sincerely thanked the doctor for this valuable information. On the way back, Maya enthusiastically recalled the incredible stories she had just heard, and Henry apologized for dragging her on a trip that did not yield the desired results. I lit up with a smile and asked Henry if he had plans after work because she wanted to visit a place she had long dreamed of seeing. Henry fell silent when the mice kindly invited him to have dinner together. The scene ended with him happily preparing for his first official date with a young girl. Nodding, Henry was still a bit depressed after failing to get medicine from Gonza, so I decisively decided to cheer him up in the only way she knew, simply by enjoying delicious food. She, shining with delight, led Henry to the bustling, colorful Kuru district known as the culinary paradise of the capital, with many stalls selling fruits and tempting dishes. Maya enthusiastically explained that Kuro collects culinary treasures from many countries. Visitors of the tavern hideout highly recommended this place and said that due to the large crowd she should go there with a reliable man like Henry for safety. Henry confidently smiled and said that his greatest joy is finding delicious food, so his nose is sharp to catch the best establishments. Henry admitted that the most pleasant privilege of being promoted to head of the civil service is the ability to extend the lunch break a little, provided he did his job well, and he proudly insisted that he was an extremely diligent worker, so no one had the right to complain about this little indulgence. Mai laughed, saying that even by that characteristic aura she recognized a workaholic in him. Suddenly the air was filled with a rich, familiar aroma of spices, and Mai cried out with delight and rushed to the stall. The smell awakened nostalgia for her homeland. Henry, interested if it was a dish from her world, noticed that the aroma leaned towards tempting ethnic cuisine. She eagerly watched as the vendor skillfully poured white dough onto a hot pan and tightly wrapped fresh fillings inside. He removed the attachment. He held the hot dish and could not wait to taste it. Just after taking a bite, Mai exclaimed with delight, "An incredible taste, a perfect balance of spicy chili sauce and rich sweetness of the filling, so close to her old world that tears sparkled in her eyes from emotion and happiness." When Henry saw Mai's tears, his heart ached with worry for a moment, but she quickly reassured him those were tears of joy. Although the food was hot, Henry felt deep satisfaction and gratitude because he saw her true happiness. After the meal, Mai happily invited Henry to the restaurant she had chosen herself. Suddenly Henry reached out, squeezed her palm, and warned her to be careful. Rumors said that beautiful people who get lost in Kuru never find their way back. Mai froze from the unexpected boldness and compliment from such a serious man, thinking he had never spoken like that before, and her heart fluttered. They sat in a roadside diner and the hostess served a generous seafood dinner. Crispy fried white fish with vegetable sauce, shrimp fried with rock salt, and a bowl of rice noodles with scallops. Mai was in seventh heaven from how the sweet shrimp played with the salty rock salt, and the tender fish in sweet and sour sauce melted in her mouth. She exclaimed, "Wonderful," and admitted that since arriving in this world, she had never felt such enthusiasm and vigor. While they cheerfully discussed the dishes, a boy rushing with a skewer of meat stumbled and flew straight to their table. The sharp skewer in his hand instantly became a danger. Mai immediately reacted. A flash of magical light exploded, protecting the boy from a painful fall, and Henry watched all this stunned and amazed. Henry quickly caught the boy and admonished the mother to watch the child more carefully when allowing him to handle sharp objects like skewers, then turned to Mai with eyes full of surprise and quiet admiration for how she was able to create a protective barrier so quickly without any spell, and asked if she herself understood this difference, although she looked quite innocent. He admitted that ordinary people usually do not see barriers, but he has beastman blood, so he clearly saw that incredible power Mai had just used, and then Mai remembered that even stray cats saw her hidden barrier and began to understand that she was different. She confessed to Henry that she could cast barriers and that it was entirely thanks to the knowledge and mana left to her by grandmother Ryo, and Henry silently listened with a thoughtful face which slightly worried Mai, and she hesitantly asked if he was angry that she had hidden her magic for so long. Henry hastily assured her that he was not angry, just stunned by such powerful magic. He said that in his life he had known only two people who could cast spells without speaking words, Kiria and her master. Kiria sometimes still spoke the spells just to look cool in front of others. Henry sternly warned me that mages are already extremely rare and valuable. If it becomes known that she can perform magic without spells, various forces will definitely try to recruit and use her. Me shuddered at the very thought and assured that she did not want to get involved in such matters. She smiled and said that if talks about magic brought trouble, she would rather keep it as her personal secret. Henry nodded in agreement and promised never to mention it again so that her peaceful life would remain safe. She nostalgically recalled the advice of her grandmother Ryo from the ancient world: moderation is best in everything. She remembered her grandmother's coffee shop. Although it yielded only modest profit, their life never fell into want or trouble. Mai wondered if her grandmother had quietly used magic to cover household expenses, as she does now, and realized that her grandmother had hidden her magic for so many years even from her own granddaughter. Mai guessed if her grandmother had survived some traumatic past related to magic that made her hide until the end of her life, and felt that sometimes hiding power is a way to protect oneself from unexpected misfortunes. Seeing Mai deep in thought, Henry asked about her. She admitted that she was afraid. If she used her power carelessly, she could be exposed, but standing aside and doing nothing when she could help was breaking her heart. She did not regret having saved that boy earlier. Mai looked Henry straight in the eyes and said firmly that even if many people found out about her, she would still act the same way if it helped someone, and admitted that since she came into this world, she dreamed of living with meaning and helping those around her. Henry quietly noticed the determination in Maya's eyes and smiled gently, tenderly suggesting that if she had already chosen this path, let him go with her, support her, and help do good as safely as possible. Henry solemnly promised to use all his experience and knowledge as a senior civil servant to support Mai in any situation, and Mai was stunned and worried that she might interfere with his intense work. But Henry insisted he could handle it and it would not be a problem, confessing that until now he had lived only for work and never had personal dreams or goals. But if he could become Mai's assistant and make her life brighter every day, that would be the greatest happiness he could dream of. Mai was touched by Henry's sincerity and thought he was truly a very strong and warm man. My mother gladly agreed to accept Henry as her assistant and warned him not to refuse the promise. They smiled and sealed their new partnership with a handshake. Having just become her faithful assistant, Henry's face lit up with an interesting spark. He impatiently asked what magic Mai used to earn money for living and demanded that she show him immediately, which made Mai freeze from his sudden zeal. Mai decided to show off her abilities. With transformation magic before Henry's eyes, sparkling opal stones grew from a handful of earth and he froze, speechless with admiration. Then she showed how aromas of the highest quality are created with magic from dried tea leaves. Not stopping there, Mike summoned a magical cloud that became a cool shower for Henry, and with the help of a heat spell created a warm breeze that dried his hair like a modern hairdryer. Henry was completely amazed by the convenience and variety of spells Mike possessed. I opened a wooden box and showed Henry shimmering diamonds that she occasionally created from coal when inspiration struck her. Henry held these flawless stones and enchantedly examined their exquisite cut and how perfectly the light played in them, proof that their creator made extremely precise calculations. When Henry asked how many she could make at once, Mike indifferently replied about 20 effortlessly. Hearing this, Henry sank down and covered his face with his hands, realizing that Mai's power far exceeded all his expectations and that her carelessness and lack of caution were the most frightening. Henry told Mai a legend about a legendary mage who once saved the kingdom from famine by magically creating countless precious stones and exchanging them for food, and he decided that Mai's current power was no different from that legend. If people found out, she would be considered a strategic weapon of the state. Mai anxiously asked if what she had done could lead to accusations against Henry of hiding a criminal, and Henry smiled, wiped sweat from his forehead, and promised he would never report to the authorities, and if anyone asked, he would simply say, "I know nothing," to fully protect the secret of his young mistress. He blushed and with keen interest wanted to learn more about Mai's world. Admitted that her stories about the old world were fascinating and attractive, especially about the magical shower, and asked if she used magic in other household chores, and Mai looked at Henry with a gentle gaze, quietly rejoicing that she had found someone with whom she could speak without hiding anything, and smiled, saying she would be very glad if he taught her more about this world. The image was a metaphor. They were both inside a shining crystal globe, a sign of how a warm, trusting bond was slowly weaving between two lonely souls. A few days after Mai told Henry her magical secret, she felt as if she had taken a step out of loneliness and began to open her heart a little more to this world. She was bustling in the kitchen when a doorbell announced the arrival of acquaintances. Little Sophia rushed into the shop, gently calling Mai by name, followed by the kind Uncle Dion, who, as usual, asked Mai to look after Sophia that morning. Dion, Sophia's uncle, shyly scratched his head and kept thanking her without Mai watching Sophia in the mornings while the family worked. He really did not know how he would manage. Mai smiled and eased his worry, saying that playing with Sophia also helped her relieve stress and feel warmth. She felt sorry for Sophia when she learned that the girl's mother died shortly after childbirth. In a world with limited medicine, death happened too often, and even Mai's magic had no healing spell to change this fate. Mai realized that although her magic was powerful, it was not omnipotent, and she had to see the harsh truth with her own eyes, how easily lives were lost in this world. Quickly dismissing gloomy thoughts, she began to play dollhouse with Sophia, and they happily played together with plush bears and toy rabbits. Then the idea came up to go wash laundry with Sophia at the river near the house, and she enthusiastically declared that she would wash all the bedding and curtains to bask in the bright sun today. After morning play and intense work, it was time for lunch. Customers began to gather at the shop, and a special children's lunch was prepared for Sophia. A luxurious tray with stewed beef soup, raisin bread, and bright fruit jellies shaped like stars captivated the girl. Sophia ate joyfully with a satisfied expression on her face, and this simple joy filled me as well. Time flew by and Sophia's grandmother, Karen, came to pick her up with a bunch of fresh greens in her hands, a simple, sincere thank you for watching Sophia so the family could work peacefully. Seeing how Karen gently held the dozing Sophia, Mate could not help but admire and secretly dreamed that someday she would have such a warm family and such lovely children. When the lunch rush subsided, Dion returned to the shop for a late lunch and enthusiastically praised the tender stew and wonderful taste at such pleasant prices. Dion inquired about Sophia and heard from May that the girl was napping with her grandmother. During lunch, intrigued, he asked about May's parents in her old world and what they did, which plunged her into distant memories. May cheerfully recalled that her father was a university professor and her mother helped her grandmother run the canteen. She remembered well how skillfully her grandmother cooked meat dishes and her mother's skill in desserts seemed to smell of home warmth, but the conversation suddenly turned sad when she recalled the tragic car accident that took both parents when she was only 10. Since then, only they remained grandmother and granddaughter, leaning on each other along with their black cat Yatero, and the grandmother was their support, trying all her life to make up for the lack of affection. May deeply regretted and blamed herself for leaving her grandmother alone in the old world when she suddenly transformed here. She had felt this since the day she discovered her magic. May searched hundreds and thousands of times in her memory for a spell that could return a person to their native world, but in vain. Her grandmother gave her all the most valuable magical knowledge but had no magic for crossing between worlds, so May would never be able to return to repay her. Despite the relentless pain and bitter regret, May ordered herself to be stronger and decided to live joyfully in this world so as not to let her grandmother down. She wiped away tears and barely forced herself to smile. At that moment, Henry came earlier than usual, which unexpectedly surprised me. Seeing his gloomy face and anxious eyes, she immediately felt that something was wrong and anxiously asked if something had happened to him in the castle. May waved it off, wiped her tears, and reassured Henry that she was just recalling old things. Henry was silent and quietly reproached himself for letting her cry in front of him, and at that moment, Dion approached and curiously asked about the new menu that May had just posted. She anxiously explained that it was fried fish in sweet and sour sauce. She learned about it during a trip to the bustling Kuru district. Dion was surprised to hear that she went there alone. Suddenly, Henry emitted a cold, deadly orami heart clenched. He is rarely so harsh, and realizing his mistake, Dion quickly apologized and tried to leave to avoid escalating the tension. While I awkwardly tried to explain something, she accidentally spilled a bowl of sauce right on his face. I panicked, shouted an apology, and hurriedly led him inside to clean up. Inside, Mai was gripped by horror. Henry's eyes became sharp and cat-like, a sign that he was about to transform from intense emotional arousal, and she panicked, asking why it happened so suddenly without the feverish symptoms that had occurred before. Henry could do nothing but press his face in shame, unable to hold back an outburst of envy, and begged Mai to let him stay a little longer until he calmed down, but Mai quickly wriggled out with an excuse saying his clothes were ruined, and he needed to go home to change. To explain this to Dion, who was waiting outside. Outside, Dion was still trying to be helpful, saying that next time I want to go to Kira, she should call him. He will show her all the best places. Mai just smiled and refused because she did not want to annoy Henry even more. When Dion came out, she rushed into the room and found that Henry had completely transformed into a giant black cat, and Cat Henry sadly admitted that he felt terrible and useless, once again finding himself in this absurd situation. Cat Henry gloomily reminded her that Diana still seemed eager to approach Mai, and warned that those invitations might not be just kindness. Mai smiled to reassure him, said he might be too sensitive, and anxiously reminded Henry that he was still on duty at the castle, asking if he could soon return to human form. Henry sighed in despair. This strange state frightened him every time he thought that one day he might never be able to become human again. Mai was about to say something to calm him down, but Frozish felt her words would not comfort Henry. He insisted she tell the secret because he trusted her unconditionally. When silence fell, Henry's cat instinctively licked Mai's hand, and it embarrassed them both. Cat Henry hurriedly apologized, explaining that in this state his body sometimes obeys animal instincts he cannot control, which made me both ashamed and embarrassingly blush due to the overly intimate gesture. Panel 262. Mai knelt before the Cat Henry and confessed a secret. If he never returned to being human, she would leave him in this house and care for him all her life. Tears welled up because she knew perfectly well how absurd it sounded. Henry was an aristocrat from the Viscount's family. He would never need the care of a commoner. Mai quietly stroked his shiny black fur, seeking comfort. Panel 263. Mai hesitated and asked to hug Henry by the neck once more. The sight of the huge black cat painfully reminded her of Yatero from her past world. Henry, embarrassed but gentle, agreed to soothe her sorrow. She pressed him and buried her face in his warm fur. Memories of caressing Yatero surged and tears rolled down her cheek. Panel 264. Henry felt pain and anxiety tormenting Mai because of the cat in her other world, so he remained silent to let her vent. Mai confessed that she knew it was not worth being greedy. The fact that they were alive and well here was already a miracle, but the longing for Yatero was unbearable. Henry also fell silent, hurting that he so often showed Mai his weakest sides while she remained so strong and compassionate. Panel 265. She lightly touched Henry's large paw and confessed that she too was a helpless adult who cried every time she remembered her grandmother and Yatero. Smiling, she suggested creating an alliance of helpless adults to support each other in weak moments and trouble. Henry felt warm understanding from her gentle approach, but noticing his body beginning to change, he hurriedly asked her to step back so he could return to human form without awkwardness. Recovered, he came out with a stern expression and apologized for making her wait. He stunned her by asking if, when she someday in the future turned into a cat, she could treat him like Yatero to somewhat ease her longing, a sincere request that made me freeze. I looked gently at Henry and firmly shook her head. Yatero is Yatero and Henry is Henry. She emphasized that each of them was a special part of her life and would never be a replacement for the other. Henry felt a brief pang but then relaxed and smiled when Mai offered to keep petting him every time he turned into a cat because she truly loved his fur. Henry was about to return to the castle to continue working and reminded Mai to take care of herself. Before leaving, he stood by the window, looked at her with a meaningful gaze, and suddenly apologized in advance because he knew he would transform into a cat in front of her many more times. I stood confused, watching his retreating figure and wondering where he got such confidence. Henry walked down the castle corridor, blushing when he realized the obvious truth. His jealousy from seeing me with another man had triggered the transformation. He reproached himself for pettiness, even envied a client like Dion, and lost control. Henry feared that if this continued, his relationship with Mai would not progress, and she would only feel irritation and disgust toward him instead. Deeply immersed in anxious thoughts, Henry was approached by his colleague Gilch, who asked if he had problems at work because his face looked so strange. Gilch eagerly asked Henry to show him some decent places near the castle. He was already tired of food in the state canteen. Henry immediately refused and secretly decided not to reveal the location he doubted greatly, because he did not want some eloquent man like Gilch to come and throw him into that panic again about soon turning into a cat. The mood immediately turned gloomy when Henry looked out the window and saw thick black clouds approaching, heralding a strong storm over the capital. Gilch also noticed the sudden weather change after a long drought and anxiously asked if it would rain. Henry anxiously raised his eyes to the sky and silently prayed that the city's dams would withstand the approaching storm, and the chapter ended with a sinister warning about natural disasters soon to befall the Kingdom of Wellknows. The sky over the capital was covered with black clouds, and with the onset of night, the rain began to pour with such unusual, fierce force that it deeply troubled me. She was worried about little Sophia. The girl's house stood very close to the river, and the thought that she herself might be in danger did not give her peace. And then Henry appeared in the hideout, soaked to the bone in a black cloak, which made me shudder. Henry gasped and said he was afraid maybe Mai did not know how to get out. She was seeing such a terrible flood for the first time, so he rushed to her to grab and lead her to a safe place. Henry anxiously asked if Mai was alone, and when she confirmed, his face tightened. In his mind, he reproached those who were not nearby to protect her in this dangerous situation, but quickly pushed it aside and focused on the urgent task. Henry told Mai to stay calm and informed her that the sea dam had officially broken, so the situation was extremely dangerous. He urged her to follow him immediately because all residents of this area were being evacuated. Walking in the pouring rain, Mai created a special barrier in the form of a giant umbrella with a ventilation pipe on top so they would stay dry. Henry was amazed by the ingenuity and practicality of the spell when he realized they were completely dry, even though they were walking through the storm. I proudly boasted that the barrier also repelled cold and retained heat remarkably well, and Henry, fascinated, could not resist teasing the somewhat cute appearance of the barrier with a small chimney swaying above my head. When they reached the evacuation gathering point, Henry reminded Mai to drop the barrier if people saw them completely dry in the rain. It would arouse unnecessary suspicion. I immediately agreed, and horror gripped me when I saw hundreds of people huddled in an open field under the icy rain, all trembling from cold and fear of the devastating power of the disaster surrounding them. When I saw the old and children suffering from piercing cold without shelter or a dry place to sit, I was gripped by pain. She realized that even if they survived the flood, many could die from hypothermia if the situation continued further. Mai looked at Henry and decisively said she could not just stand aside. She decided to use the magic her grandmother had given her to help people because she believed that her grandmother would support saving people, not gathering power. Henry quickly understood everything and suggested I stand behind him to secretly cast the spell and avoid suspicion. He promised to take responsibility and handle any problems if anyone suspected magic. Mike concentrated deeply and imagined covering the entire square with a giant barrier. Henry watched with bated breath the powerful mana bursting out, silently admiring my astonishing speed, while a transparent screen began to form over the unprecedented space. A blinding glow flashed and created a huge magical dome that covered the entire evacuation zone. The strong barrier instantly repelled heavy raindrops and howling winds from outside, giving everyone in the square a fully protected space. The frightened crowd suddenly fell silent and froze in amazement because the rain stopped falling directly above them, although the storm still raged around. Someone reached out, touched the air, and felt the invisible wall surrounding them, and whispers spread. This is a magical barrier, a power heard of only in tales about royal archmages. Joy exploded on the faces of everyone when they realized that some mysterious mage had saved them. While the crowd applauded, Henry quietly approached closer and shielded May so she could act. May used heat magic and created warm gusts that passed through the barrier, drying clothes and warming the soaked, and waves of relief and endless thanks turned the gloomy stormy night into unexpected warmth. She did not stop there. She also used magic to turn the mud into a flat, dry area so people could sit and rest after the exhausting journey. Seeing the happy smiles and grateful eyes of mothers holding their children close, a deep warmth of peace spread in May's heart. She smiled at the sky and silently thanked her grandmother. Thanks to her gift, May performed the most important deed since she arrived in this world. And this ended the chapter with the image of May quietly standing among the joyful crowd, proud of the miracle she brought. Sophia shone and rushed into my arms, and the young lady sighed with relief seeing that the girl was safe after the storm. Dion, standing nearby, greeted them and recognized Henry as a familiar customer from the shop. When whispers began around that some powerful mage secretly protected them from the icy rain, Diana sincerely thanked, and in the warm space Sophia no longer trembled. The girl hugged me tightly and shouted joyfully as the warmth spread. Dion sadly reported that his house was probably flooded with mud and cleaning would be exhausting. May immediately offered help, but Dion politely declined, saying it was hard work for men and May watched them leave feeling guilty. Although she could cast spells without verbal incantations, she had to hide her identity and could not help with cleaning right away. Just as she was lost in thought, Henry approached her and asked if she really wanted to help people. Henry read May's feelings and decisively said that even if she could not openly use magic, there were always other ways to help. He smiled, called himself a loyal assistant, and suggested that she use his abilities to realize her ideas. I quietly admired Henry's tact and skill when he suggested instead of direct magic to bring hot drinks to cheer those in trouble. Henry believed that these small acts of care were sometimes more effective than magic. The next morning, when the rain finally stopped and the sky cleared, May and Henry set out together to inspect what had happened in the capital. I anxiously asked about the shelter for the homeless. Henry explained that the kingdom had humane rules. Those lucky enough to have a home temporarily sheltered neighbors, and for those whose homes were completely destroyed, the king ordered help with housing and food for 3 months so they could recover. I felt deep admiration for such an orderly and compassionate system of the country. Henry proudly smiled and said that the united help of the authorities and citizens is a dear and honored tradition which he respects as a person in power, and seeing his radiant face, Mai calmed down and sincerely thanked him for worrying and staying by her side all night. She sincerely admitted that without him she would have felt completely lonely and scared. Henry blushed slightly but firmly said that it was his duty and gently asked Mai to go rest and regain strength after the difficult night. Henry confessed, besides family, those who learned his true self usually distanced themselves, but Mai was different and he was infinitely grateful to her for understanding. Mai looked tenderly at Henry and said that in this world she herself was strange, trying to fit in, so she completely understood his feelings. She smiled and promised that from now on, if Henry got tired or exhausted, she would always be nearby to share the burden and encourage him, and this deeply moved Henry. After saying goodbye to Henry and returning to the hideout, Mai was shocked. Inside, everything was flooded with water and mud. She told herself that it was time for magic and released powerful streams to wash the dirt from every corner. Mai was amazed at how strong her mana was. She could tirelessly constantly create water and hot gusts of wind. She thought that usually people would spend the whole day cleaning, but thanks to magic everything was back to normal by noon. So the next morning she decided to organize a charity food distribution for the neighbors. Henry unexpectedly looked into the shop. Mai was standing over huge cauldrons of soup, and he could not help but be surprised at how quickly she got back to work. Mai cheerfully reported that she was preparing about 40 portions of food and restorative elixirs to take to the affected area. Henry anxiously asked if it would arouse suspicion to bring so many high-quality elixirs as a donation. Mai explained that she was also worried how to discreetly deliver the medicine so as not to create unnecessary problems for both of them. Henry came up with a clever plan. Mai could pose as an anonymous benefactor bringing supplies, and he would help her slip the potions into the shared medical supplies on site after they were inspected by the team. At the aid station, Dion in work clothes happily announced the arrival of hot food. Trays of food, creamy sausage soup, fried chicken, and fragrant biscuits brought great joy to the people. Mrs. Karen and other women ate and thanked again, saying that this timely help saved them from hunger and cold. Mai and Henry quietly stood in the corner, glad that the plan succeeded and no one was harmed during the recent flood. Mrs. Karen, crying, admitted that in that icy storm the most valuable thing was everyone's life, and she was sincerely grateful to that secret mage who created the protective barrier. Meanwhile, Sophia suddenly became depressed and insisted on a visit. When they visited Mai's home, Mrs. Karen reproached the child for her stubbornness. Mai watched as the two walked away, and Sophia kept turning back with sadness in her eyes. This long, important day ended with restored faith in human connections after trials. After a long day of helping, she immersed herself in a hot, foamy bath and thought that Henry must be insanely busy in the castle, calculating the damage from the storm. Just as she was finally relaxing, a sharp knock on the door startled her. She quickly got dressed and opened the door, hardly believing her eyes. Little Sophia stood on the doorstep, trembling alone at night, soaked in thin clothes. She took the girl inside and anxiously asked how she got lost and ended up here in such a miserable state. Sophia burst into sobs and frantically called for her father and grandmother in panic, while Mai tightly hugged the girl to warm and calm her but suddenly felt something strange in her embrace. A strange sound of transformation echoed in the dim, eerie light. I watched in horror as little Sophia's hands became covered in thick fur and sharp claws grew, and she looked down to see a fluffy tail emerging from beneath her clothes. I could hardly believe my eyes. Sophia had completely transformed into an incredibly cute Shiba Inu puppy with big shiny eyes. May froze for a few seconds and only fired a shocking question. Is Sophia really a beastman like Henry? The little dog wagging its tail in her arms revealed another terrible secret about the capital's inhabitants. Watching beastmen transform from human likeness into creatures is a wonder but deadly risky if someone finds out. Mai looked at the puppy Sophia in an oversized child's outfit and realized this world hides far more secrets than she imagined, so she distrustfully asked again, "Who really is that neighbor girl she loved?" When Sophia calmed down and was less afraid in her dog form, I gently asked about the term werewolves, but the child only tilted her head in confusion, probably still too young to understand her own race. Sophia whimpered every time she turned into a puppy. Grandma got fiercely angry and scolded her, saying, "No." Mai felt the family pain and understood that Mrs. Karen did not hate Sophia, but was too afraid for her safety. If such a sweet child was found in public as a werebeast, the consequences would be catastrophic. Just as Mai was about to give more instructions, Sophia suddenly turned over and, tired after a hectic day, fell soundly asleep, and Mai smiled, looking at the little fluffballs quietly snoring, and thought how lucky children are to fall asleep so quickly. She knew she had to urgently return Sophia home. Dion and Mrs. Karen were probably in panic. Mike carried Sophia into the silence of the night and silently prayed for the safety of this little secret. After walking a bit, she met Dion and Mrs. Karen, who were rushing towards her with faces flooded with tears of despair. Seeing Sophia asleep in her arms, Dion burst with joy, bowed several times, and thanked her, saying she had saved his family's life again. Dion's throat tightened. He admitted that he was afraid of losing his only daughter forever without Mai's help. The air suddenly tensed as Mai noticed scrutinizing glances from the darkness behind them. Mysterious dark figures emerged from behind, and I was overwhelmed by a heavy pressure that enveloped the entire space. She realized that Diana's family was frightened by the fact that she had seen the true likeness of Sophia. Misted Porn did not know how to tell the truth without losing their trust, and quietly hesitated whether to confess that she herself was hiding the secret of another werebeast. Mai took a deep breath and resolutely told the Dion family that she had seen Sophia's transformation for a moment, but insisted that she would pretend she saw nothing and keep this secret for life. Seeing the sincerity and determination in my eyes, Dion's father, Sophia's grandfather, was deeply moved. He placed his hand on his left chest in a werebeast gesture of respect and sincerely thanked the girl for her compassion. By the father's order, Dion was to escort me home to repay the debt of gratitude, while Mrs. Karen stood frozen in surprise at the understanding of the young mistress. Before leaving, I once again asked Mrs. Karen to continue trusting me to care for Sophia when she was busy, because I sincerely love the girl in any of her forms. Mrs. Karen looked at Mai's retreating back with a heavy gaze and quietly whispered a belated thank you. The chapter ended with the werebeast family quietly pulling their cart home through the silent night of the capital. On the way, Dion asked with curiosity if Sophia had said anything to Mai, and Mai smiled, explaining that the girl complained that she was scolded every time she transformed into a dog, but Mai reassured her, saying it was only because people were worried. Dion was silent for a long time, then suddenly asked if she was scared or disgusted when she learned the truth. Maya instantly turned to Dion with a serious expression and firmly said that she found only Sophia incredibly cute, as if from a dream. Dion was completely shocked by this. I enthusiastically described Sophia's cuteness, her chubby legs and round belly, tiny pretty ears and bright brown eyebrows which made her glow with happiness. Dion looked stunned by my obsessed admiration of the animals and considered her a real weirdo, then quietly explained the reason why Sophia lost control. On the eve of a great storm, she accidentally came across a pack of fierce hunting dogs while she was gathering herbs with her grandmother. Dion explained that usually large hunting dogs do not attack werebeasts, but since Sophia was in human form then, the pack decided she was easy prey. The lead dog rushed and attacked, causing Sophia severe psychological trauma. This extreme fear shook the structure of her body, causing her to involuntarily transform in her sleep or under stress. Dion tormented himself, blaming himself and his mother for being too strict and scolding Sophia instead of understanding her fear. He was afraid that if Sophia suddenly transformed in a crowded place, the family would not be able to protect her. Seeing Dion suffer, I immediately suggested that he continue to leave Sophia under her care. She promised to find a way to create a truly safe space where the girl could feel calm and not fear being seen by strangers. In a few days in the hideout, Mai finally hung thick curtains around the kitchen and the resting corner so that no one outside could peek in. She promised that with sufficient caution, Sophia would be able to play there freely without danger. But since then, Sophia never returned to the shop, and Maya was left a little disappointed, wondering if the Dion family still did not trust her. The capital was still bustling with recovery after the storm, and Henry was so absorbed in business that he didn't even glance into the shop. Mike, meanwhile, picked up a few acorns on the way and decided to use magic to turn them into coffee beans to recreate the taste of home. With enthusiasm, she went through all the steps, roasted the beans, cooled them, coarsely ground them, and finally got a cup of thick, dark drink. Just as Mai tasted it and noticed the flavor was slightly different from her grandmother's shop, Henry, exhausted from work, suddenly entered the coffee shop, and Mai cheerfully invited him to try her new drink, which she called coffee, recreated from her old world. Henry took a sip and noticed it smelled wonderful, but the bitterness left a strange aftertaste, unlike real coffee, and Maya was momentarily upset, wondering if using acorns had been a mistake. Mai admitted that she had transformed acorns with transmutation magic, but awkwardly could not understand why their taste turned out completely different from what she had hoped. Henry looked at the rest of the acorns and pointed to a small detail that made me freeze with shame. In one of the acorns, a worm had gnawed a tiny hole. He explained that although transformation magic can change the material's structure, if the raw material is damaged or contaminated, the final product will inherit all of it. Henry smiled, remembering how in childhood he collected acorns from which worms crawled out. The maid screamed at this, while she only covered her face and shyly laughed at her own carelessness. Henry encouraged her, even with magic in life, there is still much to learn, and it is practice that truly makes a cook valuable. He helped me wash the pots and sincerely offered to help her carry the next batch of meals to people in need. When they were pushing the cart together down the street, Henry suddenly glanced at the new curtains in my shop and asked if she was deliberately hiding something. The insight of the capital's chief civilian official stunned May, but she quickly composed herself and explained. Looking at Henry, she thought that if he found out that Sophia was also a werewolf, it could be their salvation, and the meeting ended with May's resolute promise to soon unite the two kindred souls. May hesitantly apologized for not being able to say why she hung the curtains. Henry kept a calm, polite expression and replied that he was the one who should apologize for being too inquisitive about her private affairs. Suddenly, Henry became serious and directly asked Mai if her lover valued her, then noted that during such a devastating flood, why wouldn't her lover appear to protect her or at least care for her? Mai froze, confused and full of questions from this sudden but false concern from the chief civil official of the capital. Mai immediately denied this and firmly stated that she did not have a lover as he imagined. Henry froze, his face turned pale as if struck by ice, and he recalled hearing her tell the innkeeper Ro that she would go to the spring festival with her lover. I nonchalantly explained that it was just a social lie to avoid offending Romy and to avoid troublesome romantic conversations. The atmosphere froze in eerie silence as Henry realized he had been inventing meanings and overanalyzing everything for so long. While I remained cheerful and indifferent as if nothing had happened, Henry only hid his face in shame for his serious mistake, and they both got stuck in an awkward silence. As I was leaving, strange feelings began to awaken between them, and she quietly wondered if Henry really felt something special for her, but immediately rejected this thought and reproached herself for self-deception, because Henry had previously insisted that he saw nothing romantic in her, and she convinced herself that maybe Henry was just a willing helper acting out of pure kindness, without hidden motives. I grabbed her head, torn by thoughts about whether he was helping with good intentions or out of care that went beyond simple friendship, leaving her m. Her mind was restless and could not find a clear answer. Henry silently pushed the cart next to me with a gloomy expression and said nothing more, so a quiet, thoughtful atmosphere prevailed around. I glanced at his profile and secretly dreamed that he would say something understandable instead of this silence. I so wanted to know his true feelings, but I did not dare to break that fragile, peaceful silence. Meanwhile, Henry seemed to be struggling with some internal conflict. He covered his mouth with his hand, hiding embarrassment and the words trembling on his lips but not yet daring to escape. I thought to herself, if Henry were even a little more frank, she would not have confused his feelings earlier. The scene of their walk under the capital's sky faded, and the scene shifted to the castle, where people were bustling, carefully checking the storerooms. Carius was standing and counting the flood relief supplies when suddenly he froze and suspiciously looked at the shelves. He asked a colleague if the number of healing elixirs that the state sent to the disaster site was really exactly 50 bottles. The embarrassed colleague ran up and spilled shocking news. The returned vials were not just not reduced but had increased by 40, causing the quantity in the storeroom to not match the original ledger at all. Kyria, holding the inventory sheet, could not believe it. The appearance of these 40 strange vials was absolutely illogical and terrifying, and obsessive images began to surface in her mind of my secretly brewing elixirs and Henry helping to slip them into the storeroom as the truth slowly emerged. Mai's good intentions suddenly turned out to be arson that could shake the ministry's strict control over medicines and cause unprecedented chaos among mages, and at that moment a brief essay appeared about the history of healing potions. These medicines were strictly regulated by the Ministry of Magic. Glass vials were decorated with patterns as a sign of national value, but when the new chief mage took office, he openly opposed such decorations, claiming they wasted magical power. He asked the king to allow simple, undecorated vials like ordinary market containers, and the king agreed. Since then, the royal healing potions began to look ordinary, which inadvertently opened a loophole. Ordinary people found it difficult to distinguish genuine potions from fakes. Kyria lifted a bottle of healing potion, examined it closely, and explained that the ministry's bottles have a secret mark known only to a few chosen ones. He explained that these marks are periodically changed so that criminals cannot forge them for profit. Arius checked the numbers and shockingly discovered, out of 90 found flasks, 40 were counterfeit and indistinguishable from the genuine ones. He recalled the horror of 25 years ago when an epidemic took 2 princes because they unknowingly used fake healing potions, and this again ignited the fear that someone might try to repeat that dark story in the kingdom of well-known. Old reports showed that genuine healing potions only worked when magical energy flowed through them, and counterfeit flasks were then completely useless, although they were tightly sealed in the ministry's treasury. Mages were furious and could not understand why their supplies failed, while those who brought the fakes stubbornly insisted they were real. The investigation revealed a shocking truth. The castle servants secretly swapped genuine potions for defective fakes and sold them outside. These criminals had hidden magic they did not declare, and thanks to it they secured official positions to steal, and the royal personnel department had to admit a serious mistake in selection. The kingdom suffered heavy losses. That old tragedy left a deep scar. Innocence died from complacency and misplaced trust. After that, the storage place for healing elixirs was moved from the ministry's treasury to buildings guarded around the clock by soldiers. At the same time, the production of glass bottles was strictly limited. They were made only in state workshops under special supervision, and these workshops were categorically forbidden to supply such vessels to anyone outside the castle to preserve the monopoly and guarantee the safety of royal medicines. Carius squinted and noticed that all 40 strange flasks matched perfectly from the placement of the mark to the smallest curves of the bottle, and he realized this was not the work of an amateur forger but of a master or strong magic that could reproduce so precisely. A colleague suggested noting who brought the bottles, but Carius stopped him and decided to investigate personally while patching the dam. He borrowed 2 small flasks as samples. On the riverbank, people joyfully shouted when the mages arrived to help clear the silt after the storm. Kiria asked everyone to step back while he prepared for the spell. Kiria waved his hands as powerful streams of mana burst out, and the mud with boulders seemed to come alive, moving on their own and arranging themselves into solid, stable blocks. White smoke curled and huge stones rose into the air like leaves. People held their breath in amazement because the earth obediently obeyed the mage's will, and they silently admired the miraculous power of those who served the kingdom. Children joyfully shouted at the sight and praised the great mage. Kiria smiled at the crowd's support but was tired and very much wanted something sweet to restore his strength after the great expenditure of mana. He remembered the smoked meat sandwiches Lord Grid's favorite dish and wondered whether to visit him sometime, as he considered Grid a recluse mage who rarely received guests except for Master Kiria, but sometimes he still wanted to meet this old man. Kiria still felt uneasy because of Lord Grid's reputation, so-called mad mage who once conducted an experiment on his beloved. He was 85, and for future generations he still remained a mystery. Although Lord Grid was a renowned mage, he never officially worked in the castle and devoted his entire life to pure magical research. Kiria admitted that he himself was passionately fascinated by magic, but Lord Grid's zeal was completely different, much more terrifying. Visions of a strange dark creature, evidence of forbidden demonic experiments once conducted by the great mage, floated before his eyes, and he reviewed the tattered books and felt an invisible pressure emanating from the ancient magical knowledge left behind by Grid. Kiria decided, no matter how busy I am, I should not postpone visits to important people. If you postpone once, you may never do it, so he immediately set off, still clutching an uneaten piece of bread in his hand. When Karius arrived, an old housekeeper with a kind face came out, sincerely thanked him for the unexpected visit, and invited him inside. While she slowly climbed the stairs with the stiffness and pains of old age, Karius watched and felt pity, knowing that despite her poor health, she had to take care of the entire large estate alone. Standing in the spacious reception room of the estate, Jiria thought that since Lord Grid could probably make an unlimited amount of healing potions himself, he should use them instead of forcing the servant to take on all the care. Suddenly he remembered a strict rule. Mages serving in the castle were well paid, but they were not allowed to secretly brew healing potions for themselves. At that moment the doorbell inside gave permission, and Kirias entered the office piled with books, where Lord Grid sat thoughtfully in a large chair and coldly asked who dared to disturb his silence. Kiri politely introduced himself as a student of Leetsley, said that he was now temporarily heading the magical department instead of his teacher, and sincerely explained that since Juzel Leetsley disappeared, he had no opportunity to check on Grid's condition and asked the senior mage to forgive the delay. Lord Grid twisted his lips into a mysterious smile and said that visiting the sick should be about noticing others' condition and sharing their pain, not about formal rituals. He called Kiria's polite words empty mannerism, which slightly embarrassed the young mage, but he remained respectful. Grid gestured to invite him to sit and drink tea and asked if Juzel Leetsley's whereabouts were still a mystery, to which Kiria sadly confirmed and said he was still praying for his teacher's rescue. Lord Grid calmly sipped tea and bitterly remarked that prayers provide no practical benefit, which made Kirias feel pity and a desire to finish this day as soon as possible. The conversation and leave. Just as Kirias was about to leave, Lord Grid's sharp gaze fell on the bag beside him, and he sharply demanded to know what was inside. Stunned and embarrassed, Kirias honestly admitted that there were empty healing potion bottles he had brought to figure some things out, after which Grid without hesitation ordered the bottles to be handed over for immediate inspection. As soon as Grid took a bottle and held it up to the light, his face turned pale and he froze. Drops of sweat ran down the forehead of the old great mage and he incessantly whispered, "Impossible." Kiria anxiously asked what was the matter, but Grid seemed frozen by an incredible discovery. Suddenly he asked if Kiria understood the technique of mana analysis, and Kiria uncertainly admitted he knew only a little. Grid sharply denied that the castle mages were too focused on practice and had abandoned serious research, and demanded that Kiria immediately say who created that bottle. Kirias tried to explain that this could just be the work of an ordinary glassblower, but Grid sharply interrupted him with a shout and loudly exclaimed that he was completely wrong. He raised the vial high, his eyes bulging with determination, and declared that this was absolutely not the work of an ordinary craftsman. In a stern voice, Grid ordered Kirias to find and bring to him the mage who made this vial at any cost. The old archmage pressed the vial to his chest as if it were a priceless treasure, and, unable to contain his emotions, exclaimed that the creator was the person he had been waiting for 55 years. With frightened certainty he stated that there could be no mistake. The mark and the exquisite technique could belong only to one person, Rial, and his name echoed again in the quiet office, filling the air with sharp tension and mystery. Kiria froze in shock at the name Rial, silently asking herself if this was the missing lover from the ancient legend of Lord Grid. Grid lost his usual calm, squeezed her hand, and insistently declared that the vial still clearly showed the beautiful magical traces of that woman. Angrily reproaching Kiria for standing stunned instead of rushing to find the one who made the bottle and bring him back, his impatience and desperate desire to return the lost beloved outweighed her own feelings, and she felt immense pressure and fear before the power of love that had lasted over half a century. Kiria awkwardly promised to deal with it immediately but asked to leave the vial as evidence, which needed to be returned to the castle. Though reluctantly, Grid handed it over and watched as Kiria hurriedly walked away with a worried expression. Leaving the estate, Kiria pieced together the facts and could not understand why Grid was so sure that the vial was made by Rial when the mage's lover had long disappeared, and he realized that by tracing the origin of the vial, the whole mystery could be unraveled, so he decided to find the one who directly inspected the healing potions at the storm site. Kiria's met the inspector. She assured him that she personally counted all the submitted vials. Opening a notebook, she detailed that the army sent 50 vials by Captain McClaw's transport, and the rest were mostly commercial goods donated by benefactors. Eagerly asking about the large donations, Kiri learned that the noble families Asal and Halford each contributed 50 vials. The inspector turned the page and revealed a shocking fact. The remaining 40 vials were delivered by the chief clerk Henry Howler. Kiri froze for a few seconds, his face filled with surprise when his name appeared, and he immediately understood that these 40 vials were exactly the number of strange potions he was looking for. Curious demanded to know why Henry was behind that donation, and asked the inspector whether the vials were from the Howler family or someone else. The inspector awkwardly replied that Henry never revealed the donors' names, only saying it was an anonymous benefactor, and when Carius insisted about the contents, he was told that all 40 vials were of the highest grade, extremely rare healing elixirs, and a painful thought ran through him. Henry had brought in a large batch of premium potions from outside, and it went unnoticed. Kiria quietly praised the inspector for excellent work but reminded her that the appearance of a large number of special potions from outside was a very strange thing. The inspector only apologized confusedly and said that her job was only to check quality, and where it came from was not her concern. Kiria ordered the inspector to keep this secret strictly and not to relax vigilance until the very end. Then he sharply turned and, filled with excitement, rushed through the tiled corridors of the castle, and many thoughts wildly spun in his head, linking the name Rial with the mysterious connection between the 40 strange vials and Henry Howler. Kiria broke into a radiant, resolute smile and ran, quietly calling Henry, whispering to himself that he had many important questions for the chief scribe to clarify the truth that arose after the storm. Calmly, as always, Lord Grid was still playing with a glass bottle, tears rolling down his old wrinkled face, hoarsely whispering that finally the woman was alive and the very presence of this bottle was the most convincing proof. He bowed his head in trembling hands and wondered why, if Rial was still in the country, she had not come to visit him even once all these years, and said he would accept any reproach or anger from her, just to know that she was safe. Tears of joy mixed with 55 years of painful waiting fell to the floor as he, overwhelmed with emotions, called Rial by name, and the chapter ended with my silently standing by the window while Lord Grid's deepest feelings finally broke through after more than half a century during which he had kept a distant image in his heart.